Hey guys, we are here. My wife keeps staring at some new artwork that I finally managed to put together, and I'm particularly proud of. So I'm excited. It's not going to show up this chapter, but it'll be on in the next. It'll be on in the next podcast. But what are you doing?
I'm trying to take a picture.
She loves trying to take pictures of me when she thinks I'm not looking, and I hate it because the worst time that she ever does this is when I'm asleep. And I have absolutely no defense against that, and I just feel so violated every time that happens. It's so mean.
Moving, yo.
Good. I'm not trying to be photogenic here. In any case, we are due to react to some reviews that these guys have left, and I saw some pieces of some of these, and I'm not sure if I really pissed someone off or if they're really excited or both. So I'm kind of excited to get into this one. Are you gonna keep taking photos?
I'm done.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you. Are you?
All right. We're reading.
All right. So these are reviews to chapter 6. So this was the chapter where Akurui gave up solar intelligence.
Oh, my heart. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
New reviewer. Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Naked Truth Lies. That's an interesting handle, buddy. All right.
That certainly stands out.
All right. Well, as gloomy as this chapter is, let's freaking go. Torchwick appears. Can't wait to see what he does.
All right. So we have a Torchwick fan in here. All right. Cool.
All right. Hey, he has some sick character design. I can't blame you.
He does. He's like, he's fun. He's a fun villain. Like, he didn't have to be a major player in the. He was a semi-major player for a while there, but he didn't need to be anything more than that. And I can appreciate that kind of character. Let's see. I think we're going to save this one for last because that's a really long.
We're
my
skip
goodness.
that one for a moment. All right. Next reviewer is. Oh, sorry. Thank you.
Naked Truth Lies.
All right. Fairy Sing Girl. It's nice to have Kurai, Mina, Eri, and Ida finally back at the dorm. Looks like their relaxation is only short-lived, though, after All Might and Aizawa came to deliver the worst news to Class 1A that all heroes are going to be forced to actually kill villains. Yeah. And poor Akurui. I don't blame him for being this angry and frustrated after being outsmarted by this Umbra villain.
Okay, see, that's something that I'm actually relieved by, is, like, people's reaction to Akurui, like, being that upset. Because I'm like, one of the things that I kind of worried about is that people would be like, why is Akurui overreacting to this? But I'm glad that I was able to play the stakes well enough to where people are like, oh no, it makes sense that he's freaking out like this.
Yeah.
So I'm like, all right, cool.
Yay.
Glad I did that.
All right. Thank you, Fairy Sing Girl. All right. Joe Clone. Holy expository lore dump, Batman. Oh, I love this guy. All right.
That's an opening.
All the friends that said Kurai shouldn't blame himself were correct. Blake's comments definitely struck hard, though. And wow, you chose now to go into her past a few scenes later. I don't remember much of Ruby anymore. Stopped after Volume 5.
Same, bud.
I think your Adam is even worse than the official canon Adam, and he hasn't even been in the story until Blake said his name.
That's actually not true. This, Adam basically did to her in this version what he did to her in the original Ruby canon. Like,
that's what I was.
He was a sadistic son of a gun.
Yeah. Did she have that scar in the show?
Yes, she did. That was in Volume 3 when the fall of Beacon happened. He came after her and her classmates. That's when he took Yang's arm and he stabbed her and he made her watch. Also,
I already mentioned it to you, but I noticed that quote from Brainiac at the end of Legion of Superheroes in here.
Evil does not die, it evolves.
That line is engraved in my childhood for all time. Of course I would see it.
So for a bit of context, Legion of Superheroes was a show. Yuri Lowenthal voices Superman in the show.
Oh, no way.
He also voices
That's okay.
He also voices like this clone version of Superman who was like supposed to be Superman in the future, like for their generation.
Despite being Sasuke, he plays a really great he's very versatile in his voice acting.
Oh yeah, he's my favorite Peter Parker. He's my favorite Spider-Man.
Oh yeah, he's a fantastic Peter Parker.
I was about
to say, I can't talk. Can you tell I've been teaching all day long?
That's funny. So basically Superman gets met by the Legion. The Legion was built by Superman, and this is the Legion from the future. They need his help, so they come back in time and recruit him. And it's kind of about him. It was an interesting idea of him becoming Superman in the future so that he would learn what he needed to in order to become a founding member of the Legion of Heroes in the past.
Interesting.
It was supposed to go for a couple more seasons, as I understood it, but it only got canceled after one. But one of the other protagonists was Brainiac 5, who was created using some of the remains of the original Brainiac.
Oh no.
Yeah, he was like supposed to be this. It's like the Vision from Marvel. Like he's a machine, but he's also human. So he was always struggling with his Brainiac self.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. That's
and at one point Brainiac took over, and then he decided to do a full reject of the Brainiac system, leaving only the human of Brainiac 5.
That's interesting.
And they thought they had destroyed Brainiac in the process, but you get this end credit scene where the pieces pull themselves back together, and Brainiac delivers that line, "Evil does not die, it evolves."
That's phenomenal, right?
I'm like, why would you not continue that?
That's crazy. Dude, this is what happens when you don't grow up with Saturday morning cartoons. All right. I'm like, this is all news to me. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Because I know Brainiac, but I didn't know any of that.
Yeah.
All right.
I mean, the Brainiac from My Adventures with Superman was pretty good. That show is so good.
Oh, I love it. It's so precious.
All right, before we segue again, let's get back on this.
Oh, I was worried Akurui would turn himself back into the wheelchair K2SO voice Akurui.
I love that he remembered that was the voice he selected to represent him.
But realizing that his intelligence is becoming more detrimental the longer he has it, enough to use Eri as Dende to spam...
My name is Dende.
Oh my gosh. Let me finish the sentence. Enough to use Eri as Dende to spam Zenkai boosts on his body and brain long enough to complete the designs that caught me by surprise. And on top of that, he's quirkless now.
Yup.
You turned Akurui into pretty much a young Bruce Wayne. All he needs now is to get taught how to fight using that Dragon Boy suit, and he'd be the quirkless hero that the people need. Then he can retire after the war and be a doctor or something. That revelation was just really well done.
All right, cool. Oh, I was worried that
it was accepted.
Oh man, I was worried that people were going to be way more pissed about that.
Umbra recruiting Lady Nagant? Uh-oh. This might go crazy badly.
Yeah.
Enough said.
Yeah.
Also, what's Izuku got planned? How did Kudai make it even better? So many potential questions.
Do you remember what they did?
Vaguely.
You're
gonna
okay.
have to remind me after this.
I'm particularly proud of this one.
All right. For the Omaki, I like to imagine if Umbra did show up, it would either be as the Bionicle version or just a disembodied voice. See you next chapter.
We'll see you then, mate. So for context, Umbra is a character in Bionicle who so the name means dark, which is kind of interesting because he has the ability to turn his body into light. Mm-hmm. And he guards the Mask of Life, which is basically which is in a way the progenitor of all life within their universe.
Gotcha.
So he's one of the more deadly characters that appears, but he also only appears very briefly. And like I did name Umbra after him in the sense that like when he shows up, he is fully in control. Like he is full. Like it's very difficult to take control away from him whenever he's present in a situation. So like that intimidation factor is kind of what I was going for with this Umbra.
Well, thank you, Joe Clone.
Yep. Alrighty.
All right,
Silly Kita has some things to say.
Here we go. He is on one today. All right, sir. How dare? He's already been through it once. How dare you? No, you know what? Let's take this from the top.
Oh, no.
I can just hear his theme. Silly Kita needs theme music for these.
What would his theme music be for this?
I'm getting like, I don't know. We have to come up with that later.
Oh, no.
The opening scene was definitely a good one, with the entirety of Class 1A getting to put their 2 cents in on the Superman conundrum, as you've described it. Makes perfect sense that not everyone would be on board with the decision that Eri has made, and I feel like you played up on their collective tensions to an appropriate degree without making anyone do anything fully out of character.
Real quick pause. It is difficult in situations where there's so much tension between people, especially when they're all friends, because when you're afraid and when you're angry, it can make you lash out, especially to people who you're supposed to be able to trust and love. And it's this weird thing that our subconscious does, because we know, on some level, we know that they'll forgive us. That's why we have this tendency to let our darker selves out with these kinds of people, because on some level we know that they'll forgive us until they don't. So it is difficult to find that line where it's like, okay, how out of character does fear and anger actually make them before it goes too far? And if they do go too far, because that does happen, we saw that happen with Kurtai. He went way too far at one point, and it took a while for things to be okay after that. You have to figure out, it's like, okay, what can be done to make things right again? Can things be made right again? So that's kind of the tightrope I have to walk whenever I'm writing these kinds of scenes.
Gotcha. Side note, that was a great throwback to Aizawa's first lesson with all of them about heroes and fairness. Honestly, kind of surprised that we haven't seen or heard that bit come up more often in My Hero.
That's kind of a good point.
I wonder if it's played upon more in the manga.
Not from what I've seen.
No? Oh, interesting. I have some additional thoughts on Blake's part in the conversation, but I'll get to those in a moment. The scene with Akurui struggling with whether or not to send his quirk into overdrive again really gut punched me. Like, I knew why he would do it, and even that would make sense for him to do it again. It also made sense for me why he wouldn't do it, and even the decision he ended up making in the end, but once again, closing thoughts to follow.
Oh no.
Kudai's method of self-calming was a small scene, but one that I appreciated a great deal for a couple of reasons. One, it was a good way to show us how far he's come in how he wants to take care of himself, both for the sake of his loved ones and himself, which he's really needed to learn from early on in this story. Second thing that stands out is how he's really learning to let go of things that only hold him back, such as potential hatred for the sight of of his rebirth, as it were, and using it as a place to hold him steady in who he has become, as opposed to lamenting over the loss of who he used to be.
Yeah, I really wanted to. Okay, I'm glad that they're getting that out of it, because that's pretty much the reason why I picked that place to have him meditate and have him chill himself out.
I like that,
because like he's at a point where he understands, the way that he takes care of himself, quote unquote, because he doesn't really do a good job on that. He knows that needs to change, even if not for himself, for the people who love him. Because like part of him being in the hospital was like him coming to understand, it's like, okay, if I want to be my best self for Mina, for someone who has done all these things for me, who has only loved me, and I've hurt her so many times at this point, something has to change. I need to do better. This is part of that.
Very Rafiki of you.
Rafiki?
The past can't
hurt.
But
it does not matter. It is in the past. Yeah, but it still hurts. Ah, yes, the past can hurt. But the way I see it, you can either run from it or learn from it.
See, now what are you going to do? Okay, sorry.
First, I'm going to take your stick. Yeah. No, not this stick!
I literally designed an entire lesson plan on this entire conversation. Like, not because of this conversation, but like last week I taught something on this topic. So it's so funny.
Okay, so that's why
it was like an SEL lesson that I taught last week. It's cracking me up. All right.
Nice.
All right. Deku's cooking with what I believe is giving hearts technique.
Yes.
Are we going to get a big brain play from Broccoli Boy?
Yes.
It mentioned that Kudai had a contribution to the idea, which makes sense given that he developed the... Oh my gosh.
What?
Sorry. Him calling him Broccoli Boy just made me draw this weird parallel between Deku and Junior Asparagus, because... I don't know. It's 11 at night, and now I want to draw Junior Asparagus as Deku.
Oh no.
I'm sorry. This is what you do to me, guys. Okay.
Kid, I hope you're proud of yourself.
Okay. I'm going to have to draw this at some point.
Oh
no. Okay. Breathe. It mentioned that Kudai had a contribution to the idea, which makes sense given that he developed that power originally. Glad to see that these two are still bouncing ideas off each other. Can't wait to see exactly what it is that they're planning to pull off. Though I'm guessing that it involves at least a few supercharged teammates. I wonder if Deku might have figured out a way to share enough energy that the others can imitate, even briefly, some of Energon's properties instead of just enhancing their own quirks.
Interesting thought.
Also, I'm always down for Deku-ravity moments, so they get a big thumbs up from me.
Yeah.
Now, for an interaction that I sort of guessed would happen eventually, but not in this fashion, nor this depth. Blake and Kudai. Maybe it would be more accurate to say that I felt like he was going to figure out how she feels about him, which I still feel could happen, and I'm interested to witness unfold when the time is right. But their conversation still proved to be one of the highlights of this chapter. We get the full background on this version of Blake, and I have to admit I was pretty nervous about her making a move in a moment of weakness throughout, which would obviously only cause complications for all of the characters that are involved. I actually had to go back and reread a lot of their talk once I knew it wasn't going to happen, because I wanted to pay better attention to what they were saying and how they were saying it. And I just couldn't do that properly with that anticipation hanging over me. Dude, same here.
That happened to you?
The first time you read it to me, I was so stressed out that I was like, you know what, Blake, shove it. I don't care about your feelings. That's what I was thinking the whole time. But then the second time you read it, I was like, okay, I guess I can feel sorry for you, honey.
It's like,
thank you for not being bad. Okay.
I mean, jeez.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. I didn't write it in a way where I felt like that was even going to be a possibility.
That's hilarious. That's because
there's a closing thought from her where it's like toward the end she was like, okay, yeah, that was kind of a close one, but like throughout most of it, I felt like she was legitimately just that stressed about all that crap.
Well, I feel
that wasn't even on her radar until he like started doing his thing and trying to reassure her.
You have this very loyal personality, and you have so many platonic friendships that it's like, I think it makes sense to you. But most of us who are just like more flaky, I guess. I mean, for lack of a better term, everyone in my family called me flaky until I met you, and you kind of fixed that, and they like that about you. But you know, I think most of us like of the general.
That's like the only thing your dad liked about me, right?
Literally, the only thing he liked about you. But like what I'm saying is like of the general populace of angsty, emotional, romance, lovesick people. You know, when we see a situation like this, we're like, oh shoot. Oh no, don't do it. Don't do it. I'm stressed out. And you see, you're very like practical about these things. You're like, oh, friend sad, friend talk is okay. You know, I'm like over here like, no, don't do it. Don't do it. You're like the guy, the 1 in a million guy who would never even consider cheating. And you're just like, oh, friend sad. I'm sorry, friend. Bye. You know, so I think that's just you.
I can't tell if I'm being patronized or not.
No, you're unique in that way, and that's special about you. But I think that you think differently from most people in that way. Partially because you can't read the room sometimes, but
I just came out here to have a good time, and I'm honestly feeling so attacked right now.
I'm seriously complimenting you, though. This is these are good. I feel like these are good traits that you have.
Okay.
I don't know. As you are a fantastic husband, because literally the thought didn't even occur to you right there. That vulnerable moment, and it didn't even occur to you. That's how true you are to your word, and your characters kind of reflect that. So. Anyway, sorry. Right. Moving on. Your integration of her history with the White Fang into the world of My Hero Academia was flawless, and honestly, it feels like a thing that could have easily occurred in that world, especially with the whole heteromorph discrimination that's getting shown in the recent anime episodes and later manga chapters. I do see that you made it her grandfather as being a leader instead of her dad, but the alterations are certainly plausible enough for me to accept.
So real quick on that, I realized that like in terms of like how many generations would have gone by since all this stuff would have happened, it made more sense timeline wise for it to be her grandfather as opposed to her dad being one of the founders of the White Fang.
All right. I especially liked that you thought to include Humorize as a foil for her early character development, though I do feel like the World Heroes mission arc could have done to show a little bit more of her thoughts on the matter. If that's the case, do you have a specific reason for not addressing that at that time?
I do. There was just so much happening so quickly at that point in time that it would have taken away from what was the main point of what was going on.
It would have kind of
And I feel like some people said that I did that
flow.
anyways in that section of the story, because there's a lot of stuff happening all over the world literally at that point. So it's a lot to keep track of. And I was trying to keep it to what I felt like was necessary to keep the story moving.
Well, and I think it works for Blake too, because I mean, again, for me also, it's been a long time since I've seen Ruby, but what I remember from her is like stuff would happen and you wouldn't even like tell how deeply it was affecting her until later on when she opened up about it. It's like, oh wait, you actually had this connection to the situation but didn't say anything until now. I feel like that's just true to her personality.
That's also true.
Because she doesn't wear
She
her
doesn't talk to
emotions on
people.
her sleeve in general.
Yeah.
It just kind of bubbles over later on.
Yeah.
All right. Kudai's reaction to all of her revelations were certainly riveting enough for me. I was a little surprised at how he let her being a killer go so readily, but his reasoning for doing so seems sound enough. Even though it's not stated as such, I'm assuming that he has something of the attitude of not my jurisdiction when it comes to the stuff like this, or just that he understands that if there was going to be any kind of legal enforceable action against her, it would have been done already.
It's more the latter that's kind of driving him in how he conducts himself in that scene. He's just like, okay, clearly people know about this. I'm not in any position to do anything about it. And at this point, even if he did do something about it, what would be the point?
Yeah. I really liked how you kept him angry at her even though he was trying to help her out. Too often there's a magical forgiveness moment dealt out too quickly and too easily for me to consider them organic or believable. I know they're more or less made up by the end of their talk. They've more or less made up by the end of their talk, but it's pretty clear how upset he actually is throughout it. He holds her accountable for all of her actions, which, in my humble opinion, is part of what makes forgiveness possible. If you don't know what you're supposed to be apologizing or forgiving someone for, then the healing process can't really take place. Bro, that was powerful. That was solid. Or be completed at the very least.
I'm gonna have to use that.
That is like, you know, that is a hard truth there.
If you don't know what you're supposed to be apologizing or forgiving someone for, then the healing process can't really take place or be completed.
Oh my gosh, that like applies to so many things in our life right now. All right. All that said, I again have to commend him for the reins he's keeping on his temper, when one might even be able to argue that he would be justified in blowing his top with all of the new pressure being laid on him.
Do you want me to take over reading, or are you good?
Does that mean I'm not reading well?
No, you're just starting to stumble over your words, and usually when you start getting to this point, you hand it off to me. But if you want to keep going, you're more than welcome to. I don't know. You're reading well enough. Guys, I think I'm in trouble.
I'll take a hint.
I think I'm in trouble. No, I'm not trying to give you a hint. Guys, I think I'm in danger. If I turn up dead, you all know it was her.
You've repeatedly stated that you dislike love triangles because they take away from the story most of the time, so I know you wouldn't include this dynamic unless you had something planned for it to bear fruit. You missed the paragraph. Just read it.
Just
Just read it. It's fine.
Okay, all right, guys. You know the drill. Okay, he goes on to say, I think that the genuinely most heartbreaking moment was when Kudai really comes to understand why Blake hates herself so much for causing his eventually fatal injury on Nabu. I was right there with him when it finally clicks that she really is almost justified in how much she despises herself because of the pain that she caused him after what happened to her. Even if he doesn't fully understand the why of how much it hurt her to be the one to drive a sword into him, on account of her probably seeing herself as the Adam in that situation, even if the wound was unintentional, unlike her own case, he can finally allow her feelings about herself to be valid in his mind, and he can go on to properly help her from there. I know he wanted to help her before he really understood, as we saw with their interactions during Christmas, and to some degree, he did help back then. But now that he has a much clearer picture of what happened, he's far better equipped to aid her going forward. Yeah, that was a lot of what I was going for in this situation. Like, I wanted, like, because they are good friends. Like, her feelings toward him notwithstanding, like, they are good friends at this point, and he wants to be able to help her, but only now is he just starting to realize how ill-equipped he was to help her deal with that. Like, part of the part that he doesn't really understand and hasn't clicked for him is, like, he's been doing stuff that he shouldn't have been, and the only reason that it's working is because it's him that's saying these things. Yeah. And he hasn't clicked on that yet. But now he's starting to understand. He at least he's able to empathize with her more. Because he's like, oh, he's like seeing her wound, seeing what she went through. Like, there's that whole bit where, like, he sees her scar, and, like, immediately his own starts, like, aching because he instantly he understands what that is. Yep. So I really wanted to drive a moment of empathy into that.
Absolutely. I like that.
So yeah, I'm glad that that's standing out, because, like, if there was a scene that was going to stand out in this chapter, I wanted that to be it. Let's see. You repeatedly stated that you dislike love triangles because they take away from the story most of the time, so I know you wouldn't include this dynamic unless you had something planned for it to bear fruit. I just can't for the life of me see what it could be at the moment. Oh, well, that's part of the journey, right? Whatever you plan to do with it, I'm sure it'll be worth the wait. I'm hoping that it will be worth the wait for you guys. That's all I can do. That's all I can do with all this is, like, I hope that the seeds that I've planted will bear a fruit that is worth it to you guys for waiting on some of these. Because I've been planting seeds for a lot of stuff for a long time now. And in the coming chapters, quite a few of those are going to start bearing fruit. I'm not going to say whether or not this is one of them, but we're getting ready to pick the fruit on some of these. And I'm hoping that you guys are happy with the results, or at least find them worthwhile. Let's see. Umbra is recruiting Nagant. Oh geez, oh dear, oh me, oh my. I'm very worried. This scares me a lot. Her on the loose with All for One's help was worrisome enough in the original canon, but with Umbra being such an unknown, I find this perspective far more terrifying. Interesting. Let's see. With All for One, we more or less knew the playbook because he had become familiar to us by that point in the story, but that is far from the case here. I'm scared. Okay, all right. I can see where you're coming from on that. Okay, so Umbra being an unknown. So I guess it's what's the saying thing? So, like, there's the saying, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, but then there's also the saying, rather the devil that you know. It's like, at least it's just so, like, with All for One, these guys know what they're getting. Yeah. Umbra, there's still too much unknown about him to, it's like, what's the game here? Yeah. What's this guy after? Let's see. Torchwick trolling the Liberation Front was hilarious, and Neo showing everyone who's the boss bitch in the room was a real thrill. Seriously, I love the way that she put Toga in her place and made it look easy. That's a rematch I'd love to see. Short though, I'm sure it would be. Oh man. Yeah, I'd like to see that rematch too, honestly. My goodness. Looks like Mataris. Yes, I know he's called Shadow in this, but it's way too hard to think of him by a different name. Is full-on Matarising again.
You're not wrong.
I mean, yeah, you're not wrong. The way that scene opened on him has me wondering what kind of shape he's going to leave Twice in if he gets his hands on him like the Commission wants him to. He'll have a freaking field day with the mess that is Twice's psychology. Yeah, he would have a field day with that. Let's see. Then again, if he's going after the trigger, then he'll be up against Torchwick and Neo, which would be interesting enough for its own reasons. Yeah, these matchups are going to be interesting. Now, for the only part of the chapter that really matters in this grand scheme of things. Sir, how dare you?
Oh, the Akurui fans are in pain.
It wasn't enough to kneecap our favorite sassy boy once. No! You had to go back and shatter the other lag he stands on, didn't you?
You know what? He's not a vegetable. He's okay. He's just...
Why? Why would you do that to Aki? I mean, I know why, but why?
Oh, my heart.
This kid has done literally nothing to deserve this other than care enough not to chance becoming a menace to society. What about all the cool stuff he should be going on to invent? Not that the new suits don't sound awesome. And all the arguments he should be having with Hatsume and curing cancer, and there was so much stuff left for him to accomplish, damn it!
Ouch, that hurt my ears.
Sorry. It's in all caps.
Yeah,
I'm trying to
exclamation points.
So sorry, yeah, I'm trying to equate the energy that's being put into this.
It is in all caps. This is true.
Yeah, like that last sentence in particular, that is just all caps. Let's see. Gotta be honest, the fact that Kurai and Monoma seem like they're about to have it out in the next chapter is doing nothing for me in light of what just happened. I don't think it's accurate for me to say that I'm mad at you as a person, but I'm mad about this happening, damn it. Those suits and him figuring out how to catch Umbra, hopefully, better be worth it. Yeah, man, I hope so.
Buddy.
Oh, man.
See, that's why I want to hurry up and release this.
I know, right?
So we can get to the next part, guys. I'm losing it.
P.S. If your wife has another Rubik's Cube, tell her to throw it at you on my behalf.
You know, I think he disappeared it after the incident.
I feel like I did, but I honestly don't even know where it is anymore.
Our son probably lost it in his room.
How long ago was that?
It's a long time ago.
It's like 2 years ago now, right?
Yeah, has it been that long?
I think it's been that long.
We are almost to that scene, guys.
Yep.
We're really close.
Oh, man. Like, yeah. No, I read her this scene, and I should have known better than to read her this scene while she was playing with a Rubik's Cube.
Well, I've never...
You didn't... you were trying to find a fidget spinner, but you couldn't find one, so you were just using a Rubik's Cube.
I had not thrown anything at you in years, to be fair.
I think it had been like 10 years since you threw something at me.
I had grown out of that. That was dumb teenage Rebecca, but dumb teenage Rebecca was revived in that moment. In that very brief moment. It's not happened since, but yes.
Yeah. No. Okay. Alright. Yeah,
Are we just gonna call it there?
I think we're gonna call it there. Enjoy the chapter, guys. We'll be back in a little
Those are
while.
some crazy reviews. Thanks,
oh,
guys.
Man.
In my past brought me to the end. I was stuck in limbo, hoping to be dead wrong. No, they took everything from me. Nothing left to see, burning down slowly. Can't bury the truth, the past is far from dead. The chances we lose when we chose never to forget. When choices made, efforts were played. The taste of blood was the beginning of the end. Beginning of the end.
Dusk of Peace. Alright, 656698. The warden of Japan's most secure supermax prison muttered with a glare of utter disgust and contempt at the recipient of his words. Congratulations on being the first thing to make it out of Tartarus that it wasn't in a bag. As he spoke the words, the doors to a darkened antechamber opened up behind him, admitting the first hints of fresh air and sunlight to the senses of a woman who had not felt their touch in many long years. Don't get so emotional, she snorted in return as she placed a fist on her right hip. Women don't like it when boys get clingy, says mommy issues loud and clear. The man reddened angrily, but he kept his voice at a reasonable volume while he replied, I don't know what the hell you did to get out of here, but a zebra doesn't change its stripes. I'll be keeping your cell ready for your return, provided the next hero doesn't bring you in a bag. At that, Kaina Tsutsumi smirked while sweeping past her former jailer and answering, Be a cold day in hell before someone gets the drop on me good enough to make that happen. Without another word between them, the woman stepped out into the light of the warm spring sun, kicking the door shut firmly behind her in the process. She still had to make her way past a chain-linked fence with an additional watchtower looming over her, but once that was also behind her, she allowed herself to finally take a moment and stop where she was able to bask in the simple sensations of being set free from wrongful imprisonment. The ocean air carried the scent of salt as it brushed through her indigo-purple tresses, tickling her skin and bringing a smile to her face as her mind registered the sounds of the water and the city in the distance. Finally, something other than the cackling of madmen and the complaints of the damned, she thought, as a relief she hadn't been expecting washed over her, bringing a film of tears to her eyes. She sniffed and wiped at them a second later, embarrassed at the fact that she had allowed her emotions to be so easily overwhelm her in this moment. If I'd been put in the slammer for something I didn't do, I'd punch anybody who mocked my expression of celebration, voluntary or not. An unfamiliar voice said, startling the woman as she swung her head around to see a young man with black hair leaning against the side of a bright red muscle car. There was a brief moment of silence before Sutsumi raised an eyebrow and asked, "So you're saying I should punch you right now?" "I'd rather you didn't, seeing as it wasn't mockery," the youth replied with a shrug. "That, and I'm sure the heroes watching us right now would take any opportunity they could to throw you back in their newly vacant cell." He was slim in stature, but her keen eyes were able to discern the whipcord muscle that constituted his frame. This was someone who utilized the fact that they appeared unassuming to great advantage, she was sure. The woman's face soured at his answer before she muttered, "You don't mince words, do you? Never saw the point in idle chatter." "What's your name, kid?" "Lady Nagant. I'm Shadow," he answered as he stepped away from the car and gave a polite bow. The words were cordial, but their implications sent ice crawling down her spine. "You're with the commission, aren't you?" she said tightly. "Here to silence their embarrassment? If I wanted you dead, you'd never know I was there, and I certainly wouldn't drop you in front of a prison meant to hold people of our caliber." Shadow replied as he straightened up and gave her a smirk. "And it'd be more accurate to say that I'm using the commission." "Using them?" "They had resources I needed for a mission of my own," he said with another shrug. "That mission is done, so for now, I need food money. Once I find a better prospect, I'll move on." Sutsumi regarded him skeptically before saying, "So you're an opportunist. I prefer pragmatist, though I suppose the line between those two words is fairly thin." "Then if you're not here to keep me quiet, what brings you over?" The former pro looked at the car behind him before muttering, "Is the commission looking for a rehire? They send you to take me to them?" "I'm here to take you wherever you want to go," Shadow replied with a small shake of his head. "Officially, it's on the commission's orders that I do so, but I'm pretty sure that they wouldn't be offering of their own volition." Sutsumi's eyes narrowed as the clouds above started to obscure the sunlight before she asked, "How sure are you about that, kid?" "As sure as I am about the fact that the same person who manipulated them into setting you free is the same person who sent that phone you got tucked away in your shirt." Shadow deadpanned, causing her to raise her hand to her chest in an instinctively protective manner, one that got her elbow pointed right at him where a soft-tipped bullet was already loaded, on the off chance of someone trying to take the chance to go after her right after she had been free. The barrel was not yet extended, but the one who called himself Shadow was no fool. He knew exactly how fast he could be dropped if he made a wrong move now. With that in mind, he lifted his hands in a surrendering motion before saying, "My quirk allows me to read people's minds, among other things. It's child's play for me to know when and how people are being coerced." There was another brief silence before Sutsumi lowered her arm and growled, "Get out of my head. I haven't touched anything other than your surface thoughts, but if it makes you feel better," Shadow replied as he allowed his own hands to fall to his sides while his eyes faded from a brilliant silver to a deep brown. "Now, do you want to continue this conversation in front of this godforsaken place, or shall I drive us to the city where we can grab whatever grub you want?" Against her will, Sutsumi's stomach rumbled, causing her to flush slightly with embarrassment. "Fine," she muttered as she started walking toward the youth, who moved to open the door for her. "Anything be better than the slop they served in there. How does tempura sound?" he asked while she climbed into the seat, surprised at how comfortable the interior was. "Either cars have improved more than I thought they could have in the last few years, or this kid's loaded," she thought as the door shut firmly beside her. Once Shadow had come around to take his place in the driver's seat, she answered him, "Kid, if you wanted me to come along without an argument, you should have led with that offer." "I'll keep that in mind." He grinned as he turned the ignition and the engine roared to life. "While we're on our way, how about we exchange some information?" "What kind of information?" "I've learned a few things about the goals of whoever's manipulating the commission from the minds of your former superiors," Shadow offered. "It's allowed me to surmise that you fit into those plans somehow, but I prefer knowing to suppositions." "To what end?" Sutsumi inquired. "If this guy's good enough to manipulate the commission like I know he has, what do you think you're going to be able to do against him?" "Not sure,"
the younger hero admitted. But first I'd like a bigger picture of what his goals are before I decide whether or not he should be stopped. He's aiming to tear down the liars who are keeping the truth censored about heroes and villains. That's good enough reason for me to go along with his plans. A nice thought, and while I'm not overly fond of the commission, I would argue the phrase, rather the devil you know. Shadow muttered as he shifted the car into first gear. I know exactly what I'm getting with the current power structure. Whoever Umbra is, I don't know enough to step aside and let him do whatever he wants once they're gone. What if his plans come to fruition and he ends up being worse than your old boss? Sutsumi briefly weighed her options as the car began to move the road beneath them, finally taking her away from the clutches of Tartarus forever. If this kid is just a mole trying to bait me for the commission to have an excuse to get rid of me, I can drop him before he makes a move, she mused. On the other hand, his loyalty to them seems tentative at best, and if he is anywhere close to my capabilities. Reaching into her shirt, Sutsumi pulled out the phone that Umbra had sent her and powered it on. I'll just let you talk to him, she decided as she had felt the car shift into second gear. Word of warning, though. If he tells me to pop your head, I'm doing it. I'll bear that in mind, Shadow replied with another smirk. This'll be interesting. It was a bright Wednesday morning at UA High, and under normal circumstances, this weekday would have seen a bustling student body scurrying to and fro as they rushed to get to class on time while reviewing notes for the upcoming yearly finals. Freshmen and sophomores would be sweating bullets while their seniors would be sharing some final classes and meals with people who they had come to consider good friends over the last 3 years before their lives would take them in separate directions. It would be an atmosphere of barely controlled chaos with undertones of excitement concerning the not-so-far-off future. This year, however, the only tones that could be felt were the overly stifling flavors of fear and tension laid upon the quiet halls while the students huddled in their dorms, many of them dreading what was to come in the following days. The war that the villains wanted, and that the Safety Commission had promised. Even those faint sounds were subdued, with a good chunk of the student population having finally withdrawn from the school after their parents learned the staff would not be attempting to countermand the order but given by the Safety Commission. The demographic included children from both in and outside the hero course, though none of the freshman heroes had withdrawn themselves. Some passed this decision off by Class 1A as just another grab for the spotlight in a year full of exhilaration, while their rivals in Class B must have been trying not to get left behind yet again. Whatever the case was, the last day of Fragile Peace was one of the tensest that any of the student body and many of their teachers had ever experienced. Having known that no manner of schoolwork would be welcome or even constructive, Nezu had ordered an early end to the semester, a first in UA history, though graduations and the like would be put on hold until the war was over, or the situation was at least less of a powder keg and more of a controlled burn. Thus it was that Class 1A was scattered throughout their buildings that morning, with some trying to work up the courage to get some food in their stomachs in this common space, while others stayed shut away in their rooms, either alone in their misery or trying to find some last scraps of solace with their closer friends. Only one of their number was missing, which led to Mina asking her fiancé, "You seen Eri today?" The pair of them were on a couch adjacent to the TV, watching Ruby and Yang engaging in a tag team battle with Kirishima and Kaminari for Smash Bros., though they all lacked their usual enthusiasm in doing so. "She went somewhere with Aizawa," he answered in a rigid tone. They wouldn't say what they were up to. Kurai had been getting shorter and shorter with his words and keyed up in his mannerisms as the dreaded day had inched closer. This had worsened greatly when he had discovered Akadori's final abuse of his quirk and Eri's assistance in the matter. Almost as if to make matters worse, the days had continued to pass without a sign of his brother's equipment being able to detect Umbra like he said it would. Mina knew that he had every right to feel the way that he did, but it didn't stop her from hating how cold and withdrawn the situation was making him, and all their classmates. It wasn't like she hadn't felt the simmering resentment toward Umbra and the general despair at the situation herself. Even so, she knew that today might be the last day they all stood together as a whole, and she hated for it to be spent like this, in bitterness and hopelessness. It wasn't like she thought they should be partying across campus, but even so. She stood up without any warning, drawing Kurai's wary gaze up at her in time for the girl to clap her hands together and announce, "All right, fam, tomorrow's going to suck. There's nothing we can do about it." But she turned around to face the rest of the room while Yang paused the game in order to render her curious attention on the sudden outburst. "If tonight is the last night we're going to have a meal under the same roof, we're going to make it one to remember." There was a very brief moment of silence before Kurai decided to play the role of supportive boyfriend and took the bait. "Okay, what are you planning to do to all of us?" He sighed as he got to his feet, albeit much more slowly than she had. "Eiji, go tell Bakugo to get in the kitchen, start working the oven," Mina said with a forced grin as she pointed at her middle school friend. "He's in charge of making those chicken wings in the freezer. All of them. No sauces, though. If he doesn't want to, tell him we'll be having whatever Aoyama wants to make for lunch." Okay, he said as he stood up from the couch, looking just as confused as everyone else while he did. Chop chop, she urged him while making a jerky motion with her other hand that reminded everyone of Ida just a little. Once he was hurrying along, she turned to Cut-Eye and waggled her phone next to her head before saying, I'm about to send you a list of necessities at the shop and the shop to get them at. Mind doing a quick run? Why me? Because you're the only one with the bike, sweetie. If he doesn't want to go, I can on my way, he muttered, cutting Yang off as he moved toward the elevator so that he could go retrieve his keys from the motorcycle. He had no idea what Mina was planning, and he wasn't exactly in the mood for a laugh, but he was pragmatic enough to know that whatever she had in mind would be better than continuing to stew in his own sense of negativity and mounting anger. Man! Yang complained after him, which he ignored. Once he was gone, Mina then turned to Sarah and said, You two mind asking Sato to whip us up some donuts or glazed cake? We're going to need it before this is all over. Sure, he agreed as he and Akabane moved away from where they had been sitting across from Ojiro and Hagakure. She had come over for breakfast at his invitation, which Mina definitely wanted to grill him over later, but that could wait. For right now, she needed to get things moving along before anyone had a chance to sink back into the humdrum state that had permeated their school. And if someone manages to drag me down with them, I don't know that I'll be able to get back up to steam, she admitted to herself before she turned to her tailed and invisible friends. I'm going to get to washing dishes we all just used, but I'll need you guys to help me set the tables with clean sets and whatever we reuse from this stuff. She told them, which saw to them nodding. At least she thought Hagakure nodded, and moving toward the kitchen with their own dirty dishes. How many should we set up for? Ojiro asked as he passed her by. Like the others, he had no real idea what was about to happen, but this seemed better than the morose alternative. Let's just start with enough for our class, but if Class B is up for it, we should get them over here too. Mina shrugged in reply. I guess since Akabane is already here, we should include her. Ooh, mind if I invite some people? Yang asked as she hopped up from the couch, the game now all but forgotten. I mean, it might depend on how many, the pink girl answered as her face screwed up in thought. We might have to start asking people to bring some chicken wings. I wonder if Lunch Rush would let us take some out of the cafeteria freezer. Wait, so Sarah gets to have his girlfriend over, no problem, but I want to invite my man over for dinner and it's suddenly a logistics issue? Yang snorted through a laugh as she pulled out her phone to send a message. Mina's head snapped around so fast it was a wonder it didn't fly off her head as she registered the American's words. You're what? She squeaked out. My man, Yang repeated with a smirk. She raised an eyebrow at the dumbstruck pink girl. And here I thought you were always the first in the know when it came to the dating lives of our gang. What? How? What? Who? Mina couldn't quite seem to get all the words out the way that she wanted them. All she knew at that moment was that if Yang Xiaolong, the girl that turned more heads than anybody in their year other than Yajirozu, had paired herself up, there should have been a riot among the male demographic of UA High. So either whoever it was had decided to keep their head down for fear of it getting cut off by a jealous classmate, or the guy was somebody that no one would have been stupid enough to mess with. But it's nobody in our class. I'd have definitely noticed that. Right? I take it securing an invite isn't an issue then. Ruby giggled, having apparently decided to play along with her sisters poking fun of their class's self-proclaimed gossip queen, who was starting to descend into a muttering crisis that would have scared Izuku were he present at that moment. When she showed no signs of slowing down, Yang shrugged and sent the text she had prepared while giggling. Too late to take it back now. I wonder if her head will explode when she finds out who it is, the younger sister said in an aside. Fresh batch of cookies says that only happens after we tell her that Ren and Nora aren't dating. Deal! And I want milk chocolate chips this time. Get those oven mitts ready, sis. You'll be making mine with all the dark chocolate once this is over. Never! You really did it. Aizawa murmured in a barely audible voice as Eri walked out from behind a secured door, the locks automatically engaging behind her as she came to stand in front of her teacher. And as far as I can tell, there won't be any lasting effects. The girl answered in an equally lowered tone, mindful of their current surroundings. Nothing like last time, anyhow. Aizawa was not a man of many words, nor was he prone to outbursts of emotion. Anyone who knew him could testify to that fact, as even full-blown villain attacks on his school and omens of a future doomed had not managed to make him lose his cool, not once. He faced nearly everything in his life, both adversity and triumph, with a muted spectrum of emotion. So, it was nothing less than an utter shock of jaw-dropping proportions when he rushed forward and seized the girl in a bone-crushing hug that all but drove the air right out of her lungs. Thank you, Harry, he said in a thick voice. Perhaps even more stunning to her at that moment was the fact that she could feel the unmistakable dampness of tears landing on her head as she found herself unable to do anything other than return what had to be the most awkward hug of her life. I think it was less weird when I brought Kai back from the dead, she thought while doing her best to get fresh air into her lungs. I need to ask Akadori about the possibility of a multiverse being created by my rewind again, because in no reality I'm aware of does Eraserhead hug anybody. Ever. Of course, at that very moment, her ears were made aware of a clicking sound unique to phones whenever a picture was taken. Her and Aizawa both slowly turned toward present Mike, who was grinning from ear to ear with a film of tears in his own eyes. This is going straight to the internet, Eraser. Mike. Aizawa's voice was completely neutral, with no sign of anything having disturbed his peace of mind whatsoever. Even so, his scarf began to slowly unfurl from around his neck as he went on to say, if you value your ability to write sheet music in any way, shape, or form, you'll hand over that device. Right now. Relax, man, Mike insisted as he dropped the smile and held up his hands in a gesture of surrender. I would never do anything to crash your lovable grump vibes with the public. Aizawa's eyes narrowed at the man, unaware of the fact that his student was doing the exact same thing at that very moment. However, he didn't miss when she asked, What'd you do, Mr. Mike? I just told you guys, I didn't post it. That's not telling us what you did, Mike. Aizawa growled as his hair drifted upward and his eyes flashed crimson. Last chance or I'll let the kid get it out of you. Eri punctuated this by cracking her knuckles and giving her blonde teacher a smile that was disturbingly reminiscent of his best friend's. He grinned nervously before swallowing past the dryness in his throat to ask, Would you believe me if I said I didn't just send a photo to joke? Eri. Aizawa deadpanned, his young charge needing no further prompting. Sir, yes, sir. "3 hours, an irritable chef, Ares returned to campus, and nearly 30 invitations later, and most of the freshman Heroes Course students were gathered in Class A's dorm room common space, wondering just what it was that Mina was planning and why it involved nearly every chicken wing on campus being laid out at the tables and countertops. There were also nearly 100 donuts, several jugs of milk, and tumblers filled with ice water spread out on the coffee tables. Also in attendance were the students who would be joining the Hero Course next year, followed closely by the Big Three. Mina was left utterly dumbstruck when Yang rushed to greet the older students, or rather, one of them in particular. Hey, handsome, she grinned before launching herself into Togata's arms, who laughed and caught her up bridal style with no visible effort. Glad you could join us. Well, it's been a while since me and Tamaki have gotten a chance to compete in a food eating contest, so I thought it'd be a good time. He smiled at her, completely unfazed by all the drop jaws he was getting from the freshman students. And seeing you is always a good time, so that's even more reason to come. What? Him? Mina gaped as she pointed at the pair. How? Ooh, can I tell them? Nejire asked excitedly. Before she could dive into the explanation regardless of the answer, Amajiki surprised everyone again by placing his hand over her mouth and mumbling, This is not something you should tell other people when the ones involved are standing right there. Aw, but it was so cute. The brunette pouted as she pulled his hand down. I gotta say, I'm pretty curious myself, said Tokage, her toothy grin on full display as she raised an eyebrow at the pair while Togata set the blonde girl down on her feet. It actually wasn't as crazy as whatever you're thinking. Yang giggled as Togata set her down so that she could turn toward a stunned Mina. Mirio needed help looking after little Eri, and since I basically helped raise Ruby, I know a thing or two about babysitting. I volunteered to give him a hand after I saw him getting tangled up in a kite string while he was playing with the kid one day, and we pretty much hit it off from there. Man, I wish I could have gotten a picture of that. Kirishima chuckled as he started to pass them by, only to be stopped by Yang, whose grin widened as she pulled her phone out. Got you covered, bud, she said through another giggle, even as Togata joined in her laughter. While the blonde girl showed the excited redhead the true extent of his entanglement, he explained, Normally I'd have just used permeation to get out of that bind. Trying to get out of it the old school way was really tough, and poor little Eri felt like it was all her fault. Yeah, he was a real damsel in distress. Yang laughed while Kirishima started to chuckle at her phone, his fingers moving to send the pictures to their class's group chat. Before the photo could be sent, however, several of the freshmen let out startled yelps as a thick arm suddenly sprouted out of Yang's stomach and lightly knocked the device out of Kirishima's hand, preventing the action from actually being completed. The girl only just caught it up in time to keep it from hitting the floor, during which the arm retreated and passed through her body to be held up by Togata, who was smiling even wider than before. Sorry, but it's kind of rude to pass photos around without their permeation, he said cheerfully, while every single one of the freshmen fell silent as they registered the implication of what had just transpired. However, that silence did not last. Yep, you can tell he's been dating my sister, Ruby groaned as she started to walk away. Gets his quirk back, the first thing he uses it for is a stupid pun. Her sister and Togata both let out bursts of laughter while their schoolmates all erupted into excited clamors for the return of the Big Three's leader, Lemillion. Of course, these cheers were soon interrupted by a collective series of groans when the man himself declared, Hey, why kick off my return with a bang when I could do it with a yang? He and his friend his girlfriend finished together, much to the chagrin of their friends and comrades. Yeah, that makes way too much sense. Sarah deadpanned from next to Akabane, who was shaking her head with her face in her hand. I think I'm going to be sick, Weiss muttered as she turned away. You don't get to talk about sick after I ate that sludge you call a pie. Bakugo grumbled under his breath. Seriously, how do you not know that an oven has to be turned on for it to work? Unfortunately for one particular party, he was overheard. Ah! Jiro shouted as she stomped off toward the elevator, hands over her ears. Can I not be surrounded by flirting people for 5 minutes? Thus, she missed the dejected look on Kaminari's face as he watched her go. While all of this was going on, Kurta had just turned up the path that led to his dorms, 2 grocery bags full of Mina's requested items in hand. He was feeling a little calmer than when he had left, having gotten a good ride in on his motorcycle, but that tentative peace of mind was shattered when he saw who was standing by the hedge that sectioned their building's plot off from the campus road. He paused for 2 seconds at the sight, his eyes widening before they narrowed into a glare, and he started to walk on, with no intention of stopping again. Get out of here before we pick up where we left off in the battle sim, he muttered as he came within reaching distance of Nito Monoma, who was regarding him with a dull, blank look. I have less than 0 patience for your brand of stupidity today. I'm not here to start a fight, nor does my class know that I'm here, the blonde boy answered in a strangely muted tone. Yeah, because if they did, Nora would probably be on her way to break your legs, Kurtai shot back as he walked by without a sideways glance. I'm sorry, Hikari. Those 3 words stopped their recipient in place, though he did not yet turn around. Come again, he said without even looking over his shoulder. I am not so foolish as to believe this will even begin to make things right between us, but it is something that I owe to you, Monoma said, his voice remaining low-pitched and calm. I did a great many things that caused you undue stress, and I— Shove it! Kurtai interrupted, sparing a glance over his shoulder as he did. Normally this is the part where I'd give some lecture about how I don't care one way or another, but congratulations! I care enough to say the following. You have been a pain in my ass enough to where if you were to end up a casualty during the coming war, I might actually laugh throughout the duration of your funeral. This was enough to stir Monoma up to give it a visible reaction, him stiffening his posture and removing his hands from his pockets. You would laugh at the death of a fellow hero, he started to say, only for black lightning to spark up around the other boy's body and a clear warning sign for him to shut his mouth before it landed him in even more trouble. A fellow hero, Kurtai repeated slowly, his body shifting enough so that he was halfway turned toward his antagonist. Who do you think you're kidding? You're no hero to anybody, and even your own classmates can see it. A malicious smile stretched his face slightly as he added, the ironic thing about all of this is that what you were hoping would happen to me is exactly what you've done to yourself. Congratulations, idiot. You played yourself, and I didn't have to lift a finger to make any of this happen. Monoma regarded him silently for another moment before he lowered his gaze and admitted, I know I deserve all of that and more. If it will help my chances that you will hear me out, please vent your frustrations as you must. Vent my— How stupid do you think I am? Kurtai snarled, dark electricity crackling in the corners of his eyes again as he did. There's literally no low you won't sink to in order to paint me in a bad light, is there? What was the plan this time? Fake an apology, get me riled up enough to lay you out so that you can go and tell the whole world that I'm the fraud you've always known me to be? Except now I know you're not a fraud, Monoma shouted in protest. The bio-lightning died away as Kurtai froze in place, his temper stopping just below the boiling point. In spite of himself, he couldn't prevent his mouth from once again asking, Come again. I was wrong about you from the beginning, the blonde student said in a clipped tone. I see that now. And, just what led you to that brilliant conclusion, Sherlock? The fact that I saw your corpse at your funeral, Monoma answered as he cast his eyes downward again. The fact is that I saw your body, I saw your friends, and I saw even a racerhead mourning for you in his way. A man who has no room in his life for nonsense. Everything that I saw at your funeral that day was what I needed to see to prove to me that you really are the guardian hero everyone believed you to be. Ah, is that all? Kurtai snarled, his temper trying to flare once again, though he held it back for the moment. I just had to die to prove you wrong, right? He let out a contemptuous snort before adding, I'm just waiting for you to bring up how I must have known that Emery was going to come and resurrect me. Start the grand charade all over again. As I said, I watched the people around you instead of fixating only on you, Hikari. Monoma replied, his gaze still cast downward. Even if Eraserhead cares about your class more than he might care to admit, he would never sanction such a grand show, nor would Principal Nezu or any of the other heroes I can think of to name who would have been involved. I may dislike your class and what they represent in the way of an obstacle for my peers, but not so to the point where I cannot see genuine suffering in the wake of a loss. Is this the part where I'm supposed to ask what your sob story is on why you became a hero? Kurai inquired sarcastically. We live in a superhuman society of heroes and villains, Monoma shrugged. Anyone to the 4th degree that you interact with has almost certainly been subjected to a loss as a result of these constant battles between good and evil. No, I have not lost anyone myself, but I have seen enough people endure that kind of tragedy to know the difference between sincerity and crocodile tears. Your friends truly believed you to be dead, and when I saw that, I was able to see you without my desire for you to be the villain. You really are the hero everyone believes you to be. Congratulations, you got with the times, Kurai snapped. But that doesn't change everything you did to make my life hell, nor the fact that you used your own classmates' quirks to do it. You had the audacity to call me a traitor when you were the one hijacking their abilities so you could pull off crap that they never helped you with on your own. Before Monoma could utter another word, the white-haired hero snarled, You want to issue an apology? Go give it to the people you stole from, whose reputations you soiled. You might find that they'll be willing to forgive you, if nothing else because they're stuck with you. I won't be so gracious, I promise that. But Monoma, it took joining forces against terrorists who were holding an entire island's worth of people hostage for me to make up with a guy I consider a brother in all but blood after we had a falling out. The incensed teenager growled. He never meant to hurt me with his actions that he took, so I suppose that helped things. There are years of history between me and Ida, and there was a part of me that I tried to repress that wanted reconciliation, and I'm honestly more than glad that we were able to do so. But you and I have nothing between us to follow that precedent. Ergo, the best you can hope from me is a cold indifference. As opposed to what? Monoma muttered almost offhandedly. There was a shudder in the air, and that was the only warning Nito Monoma had before he found himself being held up by about half a foot off the ground as he looked down in nothing less than terror at the sight of Kurai holding him up one-handed by the neckline of his shirt, black lightning rippling between them in the process. This, the other teenager threatened ominously, this is the other option, Monoma, because everyone has a breaking point, and I left that mark far behind me the day I was brought back here. This is what you could have been dealing with since day one, but I'm out of patience. Kai! A girl's voice came out right before a blur of black hair and white energy appeared between them, breaking his grip and placing his captive several feet out of his reach. What are you doing? Eri gasped as she maintained the grip on his right arm that she had applied in order to have him release Monoma. Making a point, he muttered as he shut off his quirk and then made eye contact with the girl. I think I've done that well enough now. By turning into... Don't defend me. Monoma interrupted her, making a dismissive gesture that immediately got Kurai's hackles back up. Before he could use one for all again, though, the blonde student put his hands back in his pockets and made his way to leave their dorm's lawn. He has every right to be angry at me, Miss Emery. I didn't come here to justify myself, just to do what I could to right my wrongs. Obviously, I chose a very bad time to do it, so I'll take my leave now. That would be for the best for both parties, I think. Eri nodded, giving her predecessor a warning look as she did, which led to him relaxing his hand from the fist he had kept it in the following her intervention. Thank you. How'd you know what was happening? Deku's vestige told me. Figures. Just get these bags to Mina, Kurai muttered as he held up the 2 sacks in his left hand, Monoma having already gone around the hedge, and swiftly moving to keep putting more distance between him and them. After the stunt he just pulled, I'm not up to attending the party. You know the party won't start without you, the girl tried to say as Monoma skulked away, hair veiling his dull eyes as he did. It didn't seem like he wanted to fight with you. Yes, he did, and yes, it will, he scowled in response. I'm the one who caused this whole problem with Umbra, so... What the... Kurai gasped as he moved to cup his stinging cheek, while Eri lowered her arm slowly, a dangerous look in her crimson eyes. Why? Literally why? Because everyone has already done their best to pull you and each other out of this downward spiral, and I'm not about to let you drag everyone else down again when they're all in there, doing what they can to scrap together one last memory where all of you are alive under one roof, and to have at least some measure of happiness come out of it. She answered him in a tight voice. Do you have any idea how much it means for me to get a second chance to do exactly this? The thing that so many people wish for and never get. Umbra may have an issue with you, but that doesn't... Don't spout me another line about how this isn't my fault, Kurai muttered, though with less hostility than he had used with Monoma. I've been going over your accounting of the future on a daily in my head ever since the teachers told us about Umbra, and something kept bothering me, though I wasn't able to put a finger on it what it was until a couple of days ago. Don't try to change the subject, could I? Ari warned him. We're talking about you, not where was Umbra in our future. The 10th asked in her mind, stopping her train of thought almost instantly. Kurdai regarded her passively, having apparently heard his own vestiges' verbalization of his suspicions. Meanwhile, her heartbeat began to rapidly accelerate as the implications of his words began to crash down on her. There was no Umbra, she murmured. There was... or maybe... Whoever he is, it's likely that he was killed in the initial uprising from the Liberation Front. Kurdai finished for her, his eyes becoming shadowed in the process. You said that their killings were pretty much indiscriminate at the beginning of the war, so maybe he ended up as part of a mass slaughter. That, or with me being dead, he didn't see the point in pursuing his revenge against however I wronged him, and then he didn't come after our friends. Those are the only ideas that make sense to me. But if either of those are true, then Umbra's my responsibility. The girl managed to gasp out, her anger having faded away entirely. I brought you back to life and antagonized him. If only I'd stopped at the accidental temporal reversion. Her eyes widening so much so that it was a wonder they didn't just fall out of her skull, she whispered, You said it yourself. We need one for all to defeat All for One's legacy, not you. If I had let you rest in peace, we would still have everything we need to defeat the front, and we wouldn't have to deal with... Now you get what I've been wrestling with. Kurdai deadpanned, though his gaze remained somewhat softened toward the girl. I don't feel like pretending to be happy when my actions are at least 50% responsible for why literally every hero and their families in this nation are about to suffer. Ari drew in a deep, steadying breath to arrest her runaway, guilty thoughts before she squared her shoulders and replied, Sorry, but that's not enough of a reason for me to let you off the hook. Seriously? Forget what I said about him being my fault. Whether or not Umbra had a hand in my future's doom, war was always going to erupt between the villains and heroes one day. She told him, You're missing the possibility that Umbra simply chose to work on a more silent capacity in the future than he is now. Maybe he never came to power. Maybe he never let anyone know that he had the influence to begin with. Whatever the case is, we can't assume that everything he did or does is as a result of our actions alone. He made the choice to be the villain causing all of this suffering and turmoil, whoever he is. You and I are no more responsible for this than All Might is for everything that happened at Camino. Ari, there are some days where I don't need a friend to tell me that everything is going to be okay. Kurdai shot back. This is a day where I need you to back off and let me be pissed at the situation. And there are days where we don't get to do what we want or have the time that we think we need, she argued. For all we know, tomorrow morning may be the last day we all see each other on this side of things. Do you really want to rob our friends of this last time for us to be together? So I take it you're resolved in your choice then. Stop dodging my questions. I will if you can verbalize your decision on what you know you'll be able to keep it in mind tomorrow. He challenged her, his eyes narrowing as he did. This isn't something to decide on a case-by-case basis, Ari. You do it once, people will notice. They will start connecting dots about what really happened when you brought me back. If some of them haven't started already. They will follow it up with demands that you do it over and over again so that they can be spared their own pain. That said, saving lives is what we're reminding people in post-mortem isn't saving them. Ari interrupted softly, her eyes wandering upward as she did so. I'll save as many lives as I can, but I can't go and play God again. I'm not going to do to other people what I did to you. It would be cruel, knowing what I do now. There was a few moments of silence before Kurdai dropped the bags he was carrying and moved to hug Ari, an embrace that she was quick to return, burying her face on his shoulder as she started to cry. I know this isn't an easy choice to make, he said quietly, and I can only imagine how it's been weighing on you. But I am proud of you for having the strength to stick to your conviction. Ari let out a strange half-laugh, half-sigh that blended with her tears as she held on to her hero. For a moment, she was 6 years old, clinging desperately to the costume of the brave hero who had come to stand his ground and rescue her, no matter how many pounds of flesh her captors would have of him for it. For that moment, she held out a hope that he and Deku would spirit her away into the sky, where all of her problems seemed so far away, and for even a few seconds, she could pretend that she was free of the burdens placed on her shoulders by her terrible quirk. Then the moment passed, and the two released each other to stand at arm's length. Thank you for telling me that, she snuffled as she wiped at her eyes. I guess I didn't realize how much I needed to hear it. Are you feeling grateful enough to let me go hide up in my room now? He inquired with a raised eyebrow, to which she only let out another choked laugh while shaking her head in the negative. Damn it. We don't get to pick and choose when we're heroes, she told him. And right now, every person in that room needs as many heroes as they can to help them smile. And my grumpy face is going to help that happen. How? I don't know, but I'll bet the stuff that Mina had you get will help. I'm really not so sure about that. Wait, why not? It'll be better if she tells you, he sighed, and I won't be able to enjoy the look of inevitable horror on your face if I'm not in the room, so guess I have to stick around for the party, don't I? Aries' face broke into a tear-stained smile while she said, thank you. Please do not thank me. Kurt grumbled as I started walking toward the dorms. Makes me feel like I'm doing something more worthwhile than being an ass. Well, from where I'm standing, it looks like you're working to let go of at least some of the things that are keeping you bitter, she answered while maintaining her smile. And that's something I'd consider pretty worthwhile. Letting go, huh? The Guardian hero snorted derisively. That'll be the day. What do you mean? Oh, as I'm sure Ida and several of our other classmates can attest, I'm not really a forgiving person, he deadpanned. But you did forgive him, she reminded him as they paused in front of the door. You let go of the things that were hurting both of you, and you forgave him. You forgave me when I asked for it too. You didn't do anything wrong, he started to say, only to be cut off by her holding a hand up near his face. We can argue that back and forth all day, so just let me say this, she told him firmly. Whether or not I did the right thing, from your perspective, you could have very easily chosen to bear a grudge against me for my actions. Even if it isn't in your nature, you chose to let go. And that's a beautiful thing. Just try to remember that even if it isn't your go-to, like it seems to be with Deku, you can do it. You can let go of your hatred. Is this the part where I go and forgive Monoma? Because I can... Of course not. Aries said with a roll of her eyes. As the crimson orb settled back on her hero, she did add, but I am hoping that you can start to forgive yourself. For what? For dying on our friends, breaking your promises to Mina. She raised an eyebrow at him while adding, you don't need me to tell you that. Kurt was quiet for a moment before he snorted and shook his head while going for the doors. Fat chance. But I was so heartfelt, you have to at least consider it. Fat chance, he repeated over his shoulder. Even so, he couldn't hide the fact that he was smiling again, just a little. And that was enough to set Aries' mind at ease for the time being. You cannot be serious, Tokoyami muttered. Dead serious. And I know full well how serious being dead is. Kurt sighed as he ran his fingers through his hair in a mild exasperation. And given what I've seen of this stuff, we might be waving at our ancestors from this side of things before the night is over. You gotta get some new comedy material, dude. Kaminari quipped as he eyed the now sauce-covered chicken wings lying on the table before them. I got half a dozen new quirks. I think I'm capped off for new material. It can't be that bad, can it? Sarah gulped nervously as he and Akabane also gave the food, which could only be called fearful looks. Dude, the last sauce they had me buy was dead-ass called The End. Their friend muttered as they watched Mina, Eri, and Bakugo moving around the kitchen and common space, dressing the meat in the appropriate amount of sauces for each piece. I had to sign a waiver saying that any injury that I sustained, or even someone I fed it to, as a result of consumption could not be held against the establishment. Injury? Akabane gulped, sweat quickly breeding on her brow. Oh, don't tell me you're about to chicken out, blood snot. Yang grinned from across the table, causing Akabane's eyes to flash dangerously as a result. Where's all that fire from our fight got to? You're about to find out! The hero aspirant snarled, her hand shooting out to grab one of the wings that had been treated just a few minutes ago. She wasn't even sure what sauce had been applied to it, but she had a point to prove here. Now it's a party! Yang cheered, her hand snatching up one from the same plate. Her purple eyes met Akabane's crimson ones before she added, Same time? Waiting on you, top heavy. Ruby's head swung around so fast from the next table it was a wonder her neck didn't snap out of place, her face pale and her eyes wide as she was just in time to see Yang's eyes blaze red to match her opponent's. Uh-oh, she squeaked in a very small voice, even as all the boys near the two girls immediately recognized the danger they were in and backed off accordingly. Quite by chance, Kurt wound up standing next to Sarah while the two girls started growling at one another while non-verbally daring the other to break eye contact and take the first bite, even as their classmates started to mutter among themselves. It was amid this noise that the taping hero was able to say just loud enough for Kurt to hear, Is it weird that I'm both kind of terrified and turned on by this? Kurt's face turned deadpan, and his friend thought that he was about to tell him off for discussing such a topic in public. However, he was more than a little surprised when Kurt muttered in an equally lowered tone, While not applicable to this situation specifically, I do know what you're talking about. When Sarah could only stare at him with wide eyes, the white-haired teen rolled his and added under his breath, Mina's kind of terrifying when she gets her rhythm going on the dance floor. She gets a song stuck in her head, she doesn't stop until she's danced it all out. Even if it means practicing until 4 a.m. just to get that last revolving handspring just right. As they watched, both Yang and Akabane tense their shoulders before moving fast to shove the majority of their respective wings into their mouths, even as Kurai smiled the slightest bit and admitted, when she sets herself a challenge that others might call her crazy for, she straight up looks like a little pink demon with how intense she gets. I respect her tenacity. I would even go so far as to say that I find it attractive how intense she gets. At the same time, his eyes wandered over to see Mina and Eri giggling as the former let another healthy dollop of dark sauce gather on one of the last wings that had been cooked, causing his own smile to grow a little more. When she finishes the task that she set herself, and I don't give a crap how sappy this sounds, she's so damn pretty. Wait, how's her being pretty for any different from her being attractive? Sarah asked curiously, unaware of the fact that both Akabane and Yang's faces had flushed deep red, their eyes bugging out as their poor taste buds began sounding off alarm bells in their heads. Kurai let out a soft chuckle in spite of himself before he answered, I don't know that I can explain it any better than you'll know when you know. Before the other boy could criticize his terrible advice-giving skills, the former cyborg pointed at the girls and said, I think these two may have bitten off more than they could chew. Oh God, what did I put in my body? Yang screamed as she made a beeline for the cups at the end of the table, dropping the chicken wing on an unused plate in the process. Milk first, sis! Ruby insisted as she rushed to help the now sweating girl. You know you're not supposed to go for the super hot ones first, right? Kendo commented as they all watched the scene unfolding, many of the students now wearing smiles, if not chuckling as Yang downed a full glass of milk in one draft, followed by stuffing her mouth with a donut that her sister presented in an attempt to alleviate the hellish burning on her tongue. You're supposed to warm up your palate with increasing increments so that you don't overwhelm your tolerance level all at once. Hazuki? Sero prompted as he approached the girl with red bangs, who was shivering where she stood, sweating profusely as she did. Are you okay? Mm-hmm. She mumbled through the chicken that was apparently still in her mouth. However, she cringed after the sound had escaped her throat, as if the vibrations themselves were causing her pain. She inhaled through her nose before forcing the food to go down and grabbing onto the other boy while rasping out, She ran over there first. I win, right? Sure, Sarah answered hesitantly. I mean, were there rules to whatever that? He was suddenly cut off by a sharp jab to his ribcage from Kurai's elbow, who was wearing a smile as he did. I think that's 2 for 2 now, the white-haired hero said before Sarah could ask why he had done that. You're starting to make the heavy hitter from Team Ruby look like a lightweight. Keep it up with the winning streak. You're going to put some of us out of the course next year. Well done. Good grief, man. Compliment your girl when she wins, even if you don't get it. Not for the first time in his life, Kurai wished that his quirk had a telepathic facet for situations like this one. He spoke with a small smile, but Akabane turned toward him with a worried look in her eyes, even as she sidled closer to Sarah, who reddened a little at the contact in the public setting. Next year? She repeated, her voice still raspy from the beating it had just endured. I don't mean to be a downer, but... Who knows if we'll have a next year? Kamakiri finished gruffly as he held out a glass full of milk to the girl, causing several of the others, particularly those of his classmates who were nearby, to look at him with a mixture of outrage and apprehension. Seeing this as she took the glass and put its contents to good use, the mantis-like boy shrugged and added, I'm not going to pretend like we're not all going to be pissing ourselves tomorrow. We've been getting the world's best hero training all year, and in the last few weeks, we've been kicking it into overdrive like there's no tomorrow, because we all know that's the reality we face in a very literal sense. Having a party like this, even if I'm actually managing to enjoy it, doesn't change that fact. All that in mind, I really don't see the point in pretending like we all have the luxury of wondering about what we're going to be doing next year. You're afraid to die, Kurai stated in a flat tone when no one else had the answer for the sobering declaration. You don't want to think about the future because you're afraid to hope for anything beyond a tomorrow that may never come. Yeah, well, not all of us have the luxury of coming back from the dead, Kamakiri shot back. By now, most of the students in attendance were listening in on the conversation, though the people who were directly engaged in the matter hardly noticed. As such, many of them, from both classes, bristled with outrage on Kurai's behalf at his latest comment. Luxury? Sero said defensively, stepping up to the other boy with an uncharacteristically aggressive look in his eye. You think he wanted to come back to a world where he'd have to keep fighting when he'd more than earned his right to rest in peace? You don't know anything about what Hikari had to go through after he was pulled back from the afterlife, Kaminari added hotly, causing Kamakiri to visibly show his own indignation. Before harsher words could be exchanged, Kurai stepped between the two groups and said in a hard voice, Enough! Giving his classmates a warning look, he added, They don't know what I know, so of course they don't understand what it means to die. And it's not something that any of you can talk about with first-hand authority either. We know enough to say that what he just did was uncalled for. Ojiro now interjected, wearing a hard look of his own that he directed at the mantis-like teenager. Just because we don't know everything you do about the situation doesn't mean we can't get mad on your behalf, Hikari. Kurai opened his mouth, shut it, and then allowed a furrow to appear on his brow. He appeared to be deep in thought for a few moments before he drew in a breath and said, "Then maybe I should tell everyone just what it is that they'll be facing, starting tomorrow." "We know what we're getting into, Hikari," Kendo said in an attempt to stop the conversation from escalating any further. "I know we haven't had the same encounters that your classes had with the League, but Tetsu and I faced death when we chose to go and fight the villain who tried to poison all of us in the forest, and a lot of us were out in the field, fighting humor eyes just like you guys. We've discussed the experiences with our classmates so they're not totally caught off guard when they experience the moment themselves. Everyone in Class B knows how dangerous this is going to be, I promise." "I wasn't talking about fighting the League, or their goons exactly," Kurai said with a shake of his head, even as he felt his skin crawl and his tongue attempt to stick it to the roof of his mouth so that he wouldn't have to talk about what needed to be said. "I'm talking about the moment of death itself." There was an ominous pause that caused many of the students to suddenly realize just how dry their throats were. Even the more upbeat people like Togata and Hagakure were silent as they waited his next words. In the back of the gathering, Mina and Eri were unconsciously holding on to one another for a semblance of comfort, unable to reach Kurai without causing a stir in the tense atmosphere. "Please don't force yourself," Mina thought as she felt sweat bead on her brow. Ever since returning to heroism, Kurai had defaulted to speaking of his death and resurrection in a joking manner among those he did not consider close friends, and she knew that was his chosen defense mechanism to avoid going too deep on the subject. He knew that if he could get people to laugh, or at the very least even be tempted to laugh, they would wind up feeling too awkward about the subject to continue pursuing it in a serious manner. So they would leave him to a snarky smile and scattered chuckling, not knowing how many times he had stayed up in the wee hours of the morning, trembling and sweating through his labored breaths as he did everything that he could to survive the worst moments of his life, the ones that he knew would never leave him, even if he lived to be well over 100 years old. No amount of time that passed would be enough to erase those terrifying moments. The day that he had fought to his death, and the day that he had once again been forced to breathe the foul air of the earth. And now he was... "We know what death is, Kendo," said Yanagi softly, Class B's resident spook. "It means the end for us and everything that we want to achieve. We're not kids so little that we need to have our hands held throughout the learning process." "The end?" Kurai repeated, an almost incredulous look coming into play in his face, which took many of the others by surprise, as they had honestly expected him to snap at the girl's dismissal of his coming explanation. "Death isn't the end, guys. It's the path that every person on it's the last path that every person on this earth has to walk, sure, but that doesn't make it the end." He drew in another breath as if to speak, then hesitated, his brow furrowing once again as he tried to put into words what he needed them to understand. As he was facing the struggle, he saw Mina and Eri across the room, the former looking worried while his heiress simply nodded in silence. "Forgive yourself," he could almost hear her saying. "Let go." "If death was not the end, then what became of you in the moment of your earthly passing?" Shishida, the beastly member of Class B, inquired now. Even as he spoke, Kurai could see the interest of everyone in his own class also redouble. After all, he had never shared the exact details of what he had experienced in the moment after he died, except maybe with Mina. The young man closed his eyes as his body shook with the force of the memories that recounted his final moments in Bakugo's presence, and then allowed a more peaceful expression to take its place as he finally permitted what came after the moment of what should have been his final breath to play out in his mind's eye. It was like a curtain that had veiled my eyes and ears throughout my entire life was rolled back. A layer that I never would have known existed at all had I not experienced it being taken away. I was shown colors the human race could never imagine, heard the sounds of every song that told the story of the universe, and the weight and burdens of my very flesh became nothing but a memory as I left this world behind. And then I saw it. "Saw what?" Hato asked with wide eyes, finally unable to restrain herself, even in this silence. Kurai's eyes opened to look at the brunette while maintaining a smile as he answered, "An open gate, made of what diamonds could only dream of emulating. It was so beautiful in its craftsmanship, it could have only been sung into existence. And beyond that, a path made of what gold envies, leading into an endless stretch of great halls fit for none less than kings and queens of every realm, spread across a green country, under the watchful eye of an eternal sunrise." His audience was further surprised to realize there were tears falling from his eyes as he continued, "My father and uncle welcomed me into that place, where I grew to know the names of stories of the champions of our bloodline from the men and women who had shaped our lineage themselves. It was in that grand hall that I was invited to add my name and story to our tapestry and song, as every hero by the definition of the word is invited to do so when they enter our ancestors' home. And from there, true life begins. He fell silent, wiping at his eyes to dry them, and he let out a choked half laugh. True life, huh? Jiro asked while Izuku moved in from one of the outer rings of the crowd, holding out a tissue box for his friend, who accepted it gratefully. The rocker girl could be seen wiping at her own eyes as she added, that doesn't sound so bad. Nah. Kudai chuckled again as he shook his head. It isn't. Are you sure that all of us will get to see that moment? See that when the moment comes too? Shota asked, even as he wiped some moisture in his own eye. It almost sounds too good to be true. The guardian hero finally gave them all a true smile as he gave his eyes one last dab with the tissue as he said in his shaky voice. Just try not to die eating these wings, and I think you'll be okay, because I don't think any of our ancestors are going to give us a pass if we croak on a stupid eating contest. There was a good 2 seconds of silence before Togata burst out laughing, followed by, of all people, Amajiki, which was probably what got the rest of the crowd to start laughing along, if nothing else for the sheer absurdity in which Kudai had just basically told him to get the party started. Of course, none were smiling more brightly than Mina as she gazed across the room at her beloved, joy rising in her heart as she watched him take yet another step in the direction of healing his disturbed spirit. I assure you, Mr. Redestro, the goods will arrive just in time for the crescendo of what will no doubt be your magnificent rallying speech, Roman Torchwick said through a smile that his current investor could not see. After a brief pause on his part, the man dusted off the end of his cigar on his ashtray while chuckling. Certainly not. I'm not in the habit of making mockeries of those that I happen to be in business with. It's a matter of principle, I assure you. As he was saying this, Neo gave him a sideways glance with a raised eyebrow and his favorite smile, which nearly caused him to let out the laughter he was fighting so valiantly to keep down. Even so, he managed to quell the urge and instead say, as I've said, timing is key. If the goods arrive too early, I'm sure that there will be some, let's call them eager crusaders who are more than likely to jump the gun, which might end up making your little powwow a tad too interesting, if you take my meaning. I could explain what will happen if I were to run late, but I think I'll leave that one to your imagination, seeing as I've never run behind on a mutually beneficial schedule, something I'm sure our friend Skeptic can attest to. There was another momentary silence on Roman's end while Neo poured out 2 cups of fragrant-smelling tea before he nodded again and said, and a pleasant evening to you too, sir. With that, he hung up the phone and let out a long sigh of exasperation. I tell you, Neo, the only thing more paranoid than an illegitimate businessman is a legitimate businessman who is about to let the world know that there's no such thing as a legitimate businessman. As Neo quietly held out a cup for him, which she accepted quite gratefully from the silent girl, he went on to acknowledge, but all of the hassle and negotiations, not to mention figuring out the disassembly and reconstruction line needed to actually make this product ready for use as desired, will be more than worth it once tomorrow is behind us, and we are officially made the richest 2-man crime syndicate this side of the Pacific. Even while he regarded the storage containers full of the fruits of his labor with a hungry gleam in his eye, he was made aware of Neo's raised eyebrow once again, minus that smile that he so adored. All right, 2-person syndicate if we have to split hairs. When the raised eyebrow remained, he swirled his tea with an annoyed look of his own while saying, You're just mad that your eyeliner doesn't even compare to mine. Ah, this is cute. A mocking, dry voice interjected, which startled Roman enough that he nearly spilled his tea, while turning rapidly to see a hooded stranger standing in the corner of the warehouse where Neo had just finished preparing the tea. In fact, it was to the surprise of both villains that there was a third cup levitating in the air right next to his hood, where they could see him take a deep sniff of the steaming liquid, though they could not make out any details of his figure, not even his skin tone. The only thing immediately identifiable to them was that it had to be a young man speaking, as his voice carried no small measure of unbridled confidence and strength. As if he hadn't noticed their surprise, the figure went on to say, Just the right amount of honey. If you weren't a murderer, I'd have encouraged you to make a killing by running your own tea shop. But if you weren't too dangerous for any run-of-the-mill pro hero to bring you in, well, there wouldn't be a need for anybody like me. Roman was, by any and all standards, an expert at his craft, and every aspect that came with it. As an illicit goods trader, he knew there was always a possibility for a deal to go sideways, which was why from the very beginning of his career, he had learned to be able to act as his own enforcer, as to avoid relying on others. Eventually, Neo had come along and certainly made things considerably easier for him, But behind the charming young woman and her deadly capabilities was a man still very much capable of holding his own against even the likes of some of the oldest Yakuza families. On top of all of this, there was something to be said for achieving such a level of infamy without ever utilizing or even revealing his quirk. Even so, even knowing just how dangerous Neo was when she was provoked, with one look at this hooded figure, Roman knew that something was up. He couldn't explain the sensation any better than something in his gut twisting to the point of illness at the thought of taking this person on in combat. Nothing on his face betrayed these thoughts as he set aside his tea and tipped his hat in the direction of the stranger before saying, "My apologies, but my dear Neo is attached to you. Wherever she goes, you go, blah, blah, blah." The stranger said with a dismissive wave of his hand. "I'm not here to talk about the details concerning how you conduct business. And if you even think of aiming that blade at my neck, I just might drive it through your eye when all is said and done." There was no shift in his tone or mannerisms, but it was still unsettling to see the inside of his hood glow with a silvery light before Neo did the same and crumbled into pieces beside Roman, who gripped the handle of his cane rather tightly as the twisting sensation in his stomach sharpened to an almost painful degree. Behind and to the side of the stranger, the real Neo hesitated, and Roman could hardly blame her. It had been quite some time since someone had been able to perceive her substitutions for what they really were. "Since it seems as though you're not in the mood to chat, perhaps we might get on to the business portion of this encounter," the red-headed arms dealer said, his voice still betraying none of the unease he felt. "I imagine that, given how you've managed to get in here without setting off any alarms, you could have killed Neo and I before we even knew you were here. So, what can Roman Torchwick do for you?" "Don't bother kissing ass," the intruder retorted sharply, the silver glow pulsating ominously from beneath his hood as he did. "Your inventory. I know where the rest of it is, but I also know that if anyone other than you tries to open it, the packages blow. So, you two and I are going for a little drive, after which you are going to turn over your stock to me in its entirety." Roman raised a delicate eyebrow at the other man before forming the response. "And just what makes you think that I'll agree to that? If you know as much about me as you seem to think you do, you know that I'd die rather before I ever renege on a deal that's already been sealed." The glow on the stranger's face had finally revealed enough of his features to showcase a pale skin and his mouth, which was currently stretched into what could only be described as a sinister smile. "Because if you don't do what I tell you, your precious Neo is going to spend the rest of her life under the impression that I am the one she's decided to follow to the ends of the earth. The first thing I'll do after I've ensured as much will be to have her end you in the most twisted, painful of ways, the most intimate and agonizing manners that you fear." The man's horrible smile widened even further as he added, "She'll do it all with a smile on her face, because as far as she'll be able to remember, I will be the one who saved her all those years ago, the one who kept her safe, who encouraged her to be everything that she could be, even in a world that mocked and shamed her for what she could not control." The twisting feeling in Roman's gut spiked those words, sending a new freezing sensation throughout every blood vessel in his body as he looked at Neo's face to witness something he hadn't seen in nearly a decade, her heterochromic eyes wide with fear, and a film of tears welling up in the corners of her mismatched orbs. As if sensing their turmoil, which he probably could, Roman realized, the stranger said, "Every person, be they civilian, villain, or hero, fears something enough to bend their principles in order to avoid it. Your reputation speaks to your avarice, Torchwick, but your mind?" He tapped the side of his hooded head before adding, "Your mind tells me everything I need to know in order to get what I want. And trust me, I always get what I want." Roman ground his teeth behind a stubbornly flat lip before he was able to compose himself and say, "You drive a rather hard bargain, Mr. Umbra." The figure answered shortly as he drew a blade from within the depths of his cloak. "Now get moving before I lose my temper. I've got plans for that trigger you've collected, and I'd hate to run behind schedule. After all, timing is everything, isn't it?" Roman had never been so close to biting off his own tongue in frustration in his life. Whoa, wait. Mina wheezed, holding her stomach as she pointed at Tokoyami, who had a flattened expression on his face in response to her, and most of the other people in the room, laughing to some degree at his prior statement. "There's no way I heard that right." "I do believe this is the last time I shall participate in a game of Ashido's making," he muttered. Hey, Higakure laughed. "That's not as bad as Aoyama's backup plan of interior decorator." Said boy was sulking in the corner, having been on the receiving end of the most laughs throughout this encounter. With nightfall upon them, Mina had suggested one last game before they each went back to their dorms to turn in. With their mouths still stinging, and in some people's cases still sizzling, the two classes and their upperclassmen were now going around and giving the answer to one question that was proving to be surprisingly loaded. What would each of them have done if they could have not become a hero? Naturally, no one was allowed to say that being a hero was the only option, even though some of them had tried to get away with it. The more obstinate of the bunch were then given suggested jobs until they finally cracked under the peer pressure. Tokoyami had just revealed that in the absence of his place in the hero course, he would have gone on to pursue a career in astronomy. I fail to see why this is so funny, he now grumbled. Pursuits of knowledge in the dark more than fall in line with my motifs. But that's like the opposite of finding dark stuff, Tokage cackled. To one of her classmates, she then added, Come on, Kuroiro, you gotta know what we're talking about, right? Many disregard the knowledge that finding the brightest of lights requires the traveler to pass through the deepest of darks. The other student hero murmured, being one of the few who seemed unaffected by all the laughter. His goal remains a noble pursuit, even in such a life where we did not come to welcome Tsukuyomi into our fold. At this, Tokoyami dipped his head in the other boy's direction as he said, Thank you for giving voice to the words that escaped me. All right, that is quite enough, Ida demanded, though his volume was notably restrained and raspy, owing to how poorly he had handled some of the hotter spices earlier. I understand that having a good laugh with one another is fun, but this is beginning to border on harassment. I should have known they'd back him up. The lizard-like girl snickered. All right, how about you then? What would you be doing if this hadn't worked out for you? Her question was directed at Tokoyami's first defender, who immediately stirred in anticipation of the query. I would be a spelunker, he answered without missing a beat. A what now? Yang asked Blake in an aside while everyone else looked as though that made perfect sense, though it still prompted a few scattered chuckles among the group. Cave diver. Huh. Way to cave into expectations, right? I'm ignoring you. Set, what would you be doing if you weren't around to give us nosebleeds at UA? Awase inquired with a snicker, which was shared by a number of the male demographic on both classes. Instead of getting indignant like most girls might have at such an insinuation, Tokage merely gave them all a coy grin and fluttered her eyelashes while answering, I'd be the world's hottest paleontologist. Most of the laughter in that response came from Class 1B, who knew very well the girl's borderline obsession with dinosaurs. Can't say that one really surprises me. Kendo chuckled, though she quickly turned toward a cluster of their rivals and decided to prompt, Okay, your guys' turn. Jiro, would you be making music, or was there something else that you aimed for at some point? Nah, that's on the money, the other girl grinned through her reply. Several of her friends silently felt glad for their classmate that she was able to speak about her hobby with such confidence following her initial embarrassment at being asked to lead their school festival project. Big surprise, I know. Oh yeah, you can just see the heart attacks that are about to happen at that news. Mina snickered, clearly continuing to enjoy this, perhaps more than any of the others in the gathering. Although, it was to be noted that Kaminari, Kirishima, and Tetsu could be accused of non-stop laughter throughout the game. Alright, who else is left? There had been a few surprises during the exchange, like Tokoyami, such as Shoji wanting to run for governor in his prefecture, or Kodai becoming a teacher, and even Shota wanting to be a physical therapist. Many were more or less predictable, but still fun to hear about or guess at, like how Kirishima would have gone to open and run his own gym, Ojiro doing the same with a dojo, which Kendo seemed to be the most intrigued by, Ida pursuing a career as a lawyer, then a judge, Shiozaki becoming a nun, as well as Sato becoming a master chef. There were maybe 2 people left, Bakugo being among them, though that was mostly because he had refused to consider anything other than hero work, and no one had yet worked up the courage or the patience to antagonize him with more mundane suggestions. That quickly changed when Kodai turned to Izuku and asked, What do you think about Blast Him Explode? Military explosive weapons specialist? You'd still get to blow stuff up. I don't really see that going very well. Izuku chuckled nervously as he watched one of the veins in his rival's head begin to swell. Maybe he could open up a restaurant with Sato? No! Both of the boys shouted simultaneously, prompting everyone else to break into a new round of laughter. 2 more veins popped out of Bakugo's head as he went on to rage. No kitchen around would ever be able to keep up with my quality! Says when did quality translate to ego? Ruby giggled to Weiss, who now had her face in her hand. Unfortunately, it seems that he was overheard by the riled-up blonde because he rounded on her and shouted, You got a problem with me, short stack? Okay, Mina called out, realizing the situation might get a little more heated than it needed to be, given how Yang was already on her feet with gleaming crimson eyes. We got our answer. Bakugo's the modern-day Chef Ramsay. I didn't agree to that! Mina ignored him while Weiss did her best to get the walking bomb to sit back down and settle for at least cursing out his classmates under his breath. Looking around the room, she then asked, That's not everyone, is it? Kodai had been surprisingly one of the first people to go, having stated that he would have gone on to become a detective like his father. Something about the way that he said it made her wonder if this wasn't something he had thought about at length before now. Not that it was really surprising, given that he had been made to know that he was born quirkless. Something like that, it was no wonder that he might think about what his life could have been like had he never been given one. No, if she was remembering right, the only one who hadn't gone yet was Emery. Could I ask their time-traveling friend, who was sitting on the other side of Mina. Was there anything that you thought about doing before everything? He couldn't exactly ask her outright what she had dreamed of becoming back when she was the current Aries age, owing to Class B's ignorance of One for All and everything that it entailed. Even with the created story of her having been experimented on by the League of Villains for years, it was more appropriate that he leave the question as unspecific as possible. The girl herself seemed to be deep in thought, a slight frown creasing her brow as she did. An unconscious gloom started to creep back into the room as everyone realized that it had probably been a long time since she'd had the luxury of such thoughts, given her childhood to date, but it was quickly halted by Aries' gentle laughter. It might sound silly, but I honestly can't think of anything, she giggled. Looking around the room, she then asked, You guys have any ideas? Probably not much room for me to work in a kitchen where Bakugo and Sato are trying to work together. Like hell! Bakugo snapped back on his feet while Weiss gave Ari a look that read, Why? I'd be running that joint. It'd be the biggest 5 stars you'd ever see on a restaurant. I don't need anyone's help making that. Come on, if the customers are going to sit through your shouting, you should at least have a dessert that makes the experience worth it. Sato shot back, both boys now more or less growling at one another. Do I have to remind you what happened the last time we played Overcooked? That was Icy Hot's fault and you know it. I said I didn't know how to play that game. Shut up! Nice one. Kurdai snickered to Ari, who was grinning along with everyone else as they watched the two boys get up in each other's faces. Sorry, I almost made that awkward. It's okay, the girl answered with a sweet smile. Honestly, I kind of like thinking about it. It's been a long time since I stopped to consider something like that. I actually feel kind of bad because I feel like there was something that I wanted to do, but, back before everything went to hell, but, I'm going to have to think about it. She let out another giggle as they watched Sato grab Sero by the arm and start dragging him toward the TV, while Bakugo did the same with Todoroki, who had a resigned look on his face as he did. We're going to do it again, and we're going to do it right this time! Why? Because I said so, damn it! And phone's out. Kurdai chuckled as he stood up with Mina, who was practically vibrating with excitement at what was about to go down. We gotta get a video of this. Once a fair number of people had moved past them to get a better look at the screen that was now lighting up, he planted a kiss on the side of her head and murmured, Thank you for doing all this. Glad I was able to pull it off. The pink girl replied as she leaned into a hug from him that seemed to happen almost automatically. I'm happier that you're a part of it, though. Hey guys, Ochako said as she approached with Izuku by her side, who had his phone out with a smile of his own on his face. Deku was just reminding me of something. I want to do a follow-up. Follow-up of what? Ari asked curiously. We gotta get a photo of Team Lightning Drop, the other girl insisted, prompting Mina and Kurdai's eyes to widen with surprise and remembrance. Her smile faltered a little as she went on to say, I know we'd say we'd take one again when we went full pro for before and after, but here, I'll hold the camera, Ari offered, only to have Mina grab her by the arm and yank her back to her right side. What? You're a part of this team, so get in here, the pink girl insisted with a surprisingly bright smile of her own. Now we'll have a bonus before and after. I don't think that's how these... Yes, it is. Get in here. Kurdai told Ari with a chuckle of his own, while Ochako set her boyfriend's phone on a timer and left it floating in the air while she and Deku moved to be on the future girl's right side, leaving her in the middle. You remade our team, kid. Only right that you get to be a part of it. At that, Ari couldn't help but smile in time for the flash to go off as the moment was captured. Pretty sure I'm a few months older than you, she reminded him as Deku went to see how the photo turned out. Sure, kid. He grinned as he ruffled her hair, prompting her to stick her tongue out at him. To Izuku, who then asked, How's it look? Great, he answered enthusiastically. Wow, that background filter actually looks really clean. As he showed the photo to his friends, Ari took a moment to step back and vow, This won't be the last time we get to take a photo like this. We're going to take one when we beat Shigaraki, when we graduate, when Mina and Kurdai get married, and all of our friends' weddings, and every birthday, concert, every time something special happens. No matter what happens tomorrow. That's what I'm promising you guys.
Set the stage and let the rage consume you. And like a fire burning through you. Building a cover from confetti and confessions. Maybe there will be a lesson in the rubble when it's through. Buried in metal and a million memories. The temperature is rising to 1,000 degrees. I never ever learned to let go of the pain. I'll make it all burn till nothing remains.
So, we open up with Lady Nagant getting out of prison. How'd you feel about that one?
That one was very, I don't know, foreboding for sure.
Yeah.
But I think having her run in with Shadow makes it a little bit more full of intrigue, because it's like, okay, clearly, you know,
We know where her interests are at, but Shadow's kind of like he's a little bit more ambiguous.
yeah, so it's a little hard to know what side he's on, or if
At least until later in the chapter.
or if he's even taken a side. Really, like
he's weighing his options.
He's keeping his options open for sure.
Yeah.
And so yeah, their interactions were interesting to say the least, and kind of maybe somebody's kind of working against Umbra a little bit, maybe with Umbra, who knows?
Yeah.
We'll see.
Like what was kind of interesting to me about writing this scene in particular with him is that normally he is intensely loyal. But that's the interesting thing about this version of him, is that he hasn't found a cause that he finds worthy of his loyalty yet.
Yeah.
So for now, he's just kind of
alluded to the fact that
Yeah.
he's completed some
quest.
quest.
He's done some personal quest of his, and now he's just kind of keeping his options open.
Yeah. So I mean, depending on whether you know the character, you may have some theories about that.
Yeah.
But
I'm sure
anyway,
there's a few people who can guess as to what he's been up to.
Yeah, I can, but you know, obviously, I can't give spoilers. So
Yeah, I remember like originally the chapter was just supposed to open with the scene with Eri and Aizawa, but like that didn't feel like a cold open moment. Like it felt like I needed to have something that needed to be further in the chapter, and like how do I put, like, I needed something to keep the plot line moving outside of Class A. Because like all in all, what happens with the Class A is like, yes, there's character interactions happening, there's some character development happening, but
the world is still
turning, and we need and I needed something to kind of keep that motion turning. So
Yeah,
that was the result, and I had fun with it.
Yeah, then we're moving a little bit. Do we go back into UA?
Yeah, we go back to UA. Everybody's kind of like just kind of sitting there, like, okay, we're gonna go to war tomorrow.
Extra depresso.
Yeah, they're like, some of them are like trying to, you know, just do stuff that they normally do to try and feel better.
And
Other
Mina's
people are just kind of like
like
just being by themselves, and
Mina's
it's not
had
really
enough.
working.
She's like, you know what? This could be our last time all together, just like living life. Let's live life, right?
But it's interesting too, because she's like, that's certainly true, but you can also see that she's very much forcing herself to do it. But she doesn't want everybody else to feel as crappy as she does.
Yeah.
So it's like even if she has to force herself into being happy for other people, at least maybe she can get some other people to be actually happy for a little bit.
Which is, I mean, I think it works for her character, because she's definitely the kind of the life of the party character. Yeah. And so she
wants to see people have a good time.
Absolutely. And so she's, you know, of course she's going to force all our poor introverts into doing things they don't want to do.
Writing Kurai at that scene was honestly more funny to me than anything, because he's just like, okay, what do you want?
It's going to be more annoying if he fights it.
Yep, it's going to be more of a headache if he fights it.
I wish I could be that annoying.
What's that?
I wish I could be that annoying.
What?
Just kidding.
Oh, man. Yeah, that, like, most of the other scenes with him, like, and that scene wasn't even really meant to be funny for him. Like, there were certainly some humorous aspects that could be applied, but, like, I don't know, just something about having to write him, like, this is a new type of resigned for him.
Yeah.
Because, like, we've seen him, like, be, like, emotionally resigned.
And we've seen him dig his heels in on things.
Yeah, and now he's just, like, he's kind of at a point where he's just like, all right, this is going to go a lot easier if I just do whatever shenanigans she's got in mind.
But yeah, so she kind of gets the ball rolling very slowly at first, but
kind of like telling us, just like, okay, you go do this, you go do this, you go do this, because she knows, like,
and everyone's so numb that they're just like, okay, let's do what the pink lady says.
Yep. It's like, we got nothing better to do.
And then we cut.
And then we do cut away to Aizawa and Eri, which, like I said before, was like the original, like that was supposed to be the original opening, which I feel like would have had its own merit, but again, like in terms of placing, it just didn't seem quite right, and I can't I can't entirely explain why. It just didn't feel like it didn't feel like it should be in the opening.
Yeah. Well, it's important, but it's not like it's not as much of a hook.
Yeah. Okay.
As it would have been with
Nagant and shit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like yeah. And like back to that scene for a moment. Like one of the ways that I think helped that scene to stand out in its opening is that we have the warden confirming that she's the first person to ever get out of Tartarus who wasn't dead. Because normally anybody who goes in there, you're in there for a life sentence. You're either going to stay there the rest of your life, or you're waiting to be put on the chopping block. Somehow she's gotten out of that. I don't know if you knew this, but do you remember that weird guy from Shiketsu who, like, if he massages material, he can like turn it into meatballs?
I have no memory of this.
No, he like picked on Bakugo and Kirishima during the provisional licensing exam.
Zero recollection.
He's classmates with the wind guy. I believe it's his father or his uncle who's the warden.
Oh, okay.
Which is kind of where he get like he's like Ida's uptightness taken to a 15.
Jeez. Okay.
Yeah. Like, that's kind of where he gets that from. I believe it's his dad.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Yeah. I don't think they talk about that in the anime, but there's something that mentions it in the manga.
Anyway, back to the conversation between
Eri and Aizawa. What was your take on that?
I was actually going to ask you first.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That scene was just fun to write. Like, I'm sure people can guess at what's happening here, because y'all are pretty smart. But for sake of avoiding spoilers, I'm not going to say exactly what she did. But I really wanted a moment where Aizawa treats Eri like that's his daughter.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's implied as much. You know, we get a little bit of that, like, in the original with Aizawa and little Eri. But... And it's not like these two have been avoiding each other either. Like, they've been spending time together, like, just outside of my narrative. But I just really wanted a moment to, like, kind of cement that kind of interaction between them.
I enjoyed that for sure.
Yeah.
It's nice to see Aizawa show that emotion.
I just love that bit with Eri where she's just like, I need to ask Hakurui about the possibility of a multiverse because I don't ever remember Aizawa hugging anybody ever.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, of course,
and then President Mike
trying to take a picture and getting the...
No, not trying. He did take a picture.
And then we have the Aizawa and mini Aizawa doing the Aizawa death stare, and it's just...
No, not the Aizawa, the Aizawa smile. Like the
Oh, no, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
It is a smile and a death stare at the same time.
That's true. That's very true.
Let's be real.
You're not wrong. That's very, very true.
So, great comic relief for me there, at least.
Oh, yeah. That was so good. Like, I had so much fun with that.
And then...
So we have Eri heading back to campus, which is where we kind of get back to Mina, like, trying to corral everybody and getting these...
Meanwhile, suddenly there's some new ships happening.
There's a new ship happening, yep. Well, there's one official, I'd say. One new ship sailing in this story. I don't know if people are going to remember this, but following the events of Humorize, Weiss was asking Eri about like if she had any details on their love lives in the future, specifically because she wanted to have something to hold over Yang, and Eri's just kind of like, yeah, I'm gonna let that one play out on its own because she knew she had an idea of what was coming.
Yeah.
And I'll justify this by saying that. So there's that whole thing about how girls look for someone who is like their dad or the complete opposite, and it depends on whether or not you had a good dad.
Yeah.
I feel like Lemillion has quite a few similar characteristics to Taiyang. Like just in the way that he interacts with people.
I can see that.
And like just like it's like, you know, I've watched the way that he interacts with his daughters, and you know, Mirio's inexperienced, but I like to see like that's
like
kind of
almost like a younger version of him. Okay.
Almost like a younger version of him.
I never thought of that.
You hadn't thought of that?
No.
I didn't explain that to you?
No, but it makes sense.
I mean, and then ironically, the physicality is also kind of similar. You get the blonde hair and the blue eyes, buff
big
dude.
Blonde buff boy who can handle that.
They both have really silly senses of humor.
Yeah, I love it.
So
I love it.
Like I didn't set out to I didn't necessarily set out to pair every Ruby character with someone in the story. Like, that one just made too much sense for me not to do it. So there you have it. It's like it's not even like a big pivotal moment of the story or anything. It's just like, oh yeah, this happened.
I love it. It's pretty cute.
There are things in life. There are things like that it's like you
cringy and cute at the same time.
Cringy and cute.
It's that super cringy couple. That's
but it's like,
oh my gosh, stop.
But what I mean is like in terms of like it kind of flying over everybody else's head is like, you know,
it's not taking over their whole lives.
No, and like when I was in school, like I would know 2 different people, and I knew them for a while, and then I would have no idea that they'd been dating for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And then like it would just come up in conversation. I'm kind of like, wait a minute, what?
Yeah.
So like I kind of wanted to bring one of those in.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I see it.
Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. Hado being Hado, she like wants to explain how the stuff happened, and Namaji, he's just like, no.
Calm down.
Calm down.
Calm down.
And then we have and then like we get an idea of like how like I'm gonna say it. We get a better idea of like how soft Bakugo actually is for Weiss. When he's just like is walking by, he's just like, how do you not know how to make a pie, woman?
Yeah, because he's not like freaking out and screaming and cussing her out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, not only that, he ate it.
Yeah.
He ate it.
Yeah.
Because he didn't want to hurt her feelings.
Yep. That's pretty crazy for me.
And again, my justification for this is that Bakugo is secretly a sucker for romance manga.
This is true.
This is why
canon.
This is canon. This is why we never see his dorm room, is because he has a big collection of shoujo manga, and Horikoshi knew that he would not be able to live it down, so he was able to avoid having anybody go in Bakugo's room.
Love it.
So I'm like, all right, you know what? I'm like, if it's in private, I feel like there's a few things I can get away with on softening him up for.
I'm just like, for me, like going to the OG canon, I'm just thinking, man, with Bakugo in the hospital after this whole crazy ordeal that just happened, it would be so funny if someone's like, well, let's go get him some stuff from his room so he's not so sad in his hospital room. And then they go in his room and are just like horrified and
I have a headcanon that he has a digitalized lock on his door so that only he can get in and out of it.
Oh man.
But yeah,
anyway,
that was fun.
You know, fun little ship stuff.
Then
stuff. we also we shift into Kurai returning with the groceries.
Yes,
and having an
unfortunate
run-in. Yeah, and Monoma is being surprisingly repentant.
Yeah,
which is not super expected from him.
It's interesting because like. We've seen this in the show now where he will set his ego aside. Like he'll bring his ego back as soon as he possibly can. But I feel like if he really understands the gravity of a mistake that he's made, he will do what he can to correct it, if nothing else, to save face with his teacher.
Yeah.
Because he respects Vlad King quite a bit.
Yeah.
And he's, he dug his heels in harder in this version. So, how do I put this? Like, so because he dug his heels in harder, I feel like the break in his pride had to be
a more significant one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see that. And I was a little confused by Kudai's reactions because obviously he has mixed emotions about this.
It's
like he doesn't
he's very antagonistic toward Monoma at this point, but all the same, it's not just Monoma. It's like all the other stuff that's happening.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because when everything was actually going down, it was like he was really good about not responding, but at this point he gives 0 Fs.
Yeah.
So he's just like, you know what?
He's like, I've had it.
If you want me to beat you up, I will beat you up.
Yep.
But I was a little surprised by that.
Yeah, like you could almost say this is out of character for him because like one of the things that I feel makes Kurai unique is in how almost patient he is with people who have it out for him. But he's been pushed to his limits in new ways in terms of mentally speaking. Like just what it is right now for him is that he's so used to, you know, dealing with the backlash of his actions falling on him, but now he feels like awkwardly losing his, or forcing himself to get rid of his quirk. He feels like that's on him because of whatever he did to antagonize this Umbra person.
Do you think that he's almost more angry and unable to forgive himself? So now that he has somebody who's asking for forgiveness because he sees how good he is, he's having a hard time accepting it because he doesn't think he's worth it?
Yep.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
And Aries kind of picking up on that.
That makes a lot more sense.
So something that I want to kind of touch on is that the way that I want to compare the way that Aerie and Mina act in the second half of this chapter. In that, like, I'm not saying that I wrote Mina to do anything wrong per se, but you can see that the way that Aerie is handling Kurai's trauma and trying to help him work through it is much more effective than what Mina was trying to do. Like you could kind of see her, like, when he's getting ready to talk about what happened to him, she's like, she's kind of on the sidelines going, don't do it, like, don't hurt yourself like this. And Aerie's the one going, like, no, you need to do this, you need to forgive yourself, you need to let go.
Yeah.
So how do I put this? Just like, I don't want it to seem like this is a thing where, like, Kurai and Mina are going to be at odds over something.
No. But
for people that we love, like, you can make mistakes in trying to help
also
them.
That's why we have multiple friends. We don't just rely on one relationship, because you're going to have different people speaking truth into your life from different perspectives, and that's okay. There's been times when I have been inconsolable and it's been a girlfriend who helps me and not you, even like if you've, not for lack of trying, but sometimes the things that you have to say are not the same as what one of my girlfriends is going to have to say. And that's, or
maybe even the way that they say it.
Yeah, or maybe, you know, there's nobody who can help me but you in some situations. But that's why we should be surrounding ourselves with a diverse group of friends, because we need to be hearing that truth from different sources. Can't just be relying on one person, and that really shows right here. He needs that perspective, and Aerie's been through, let's be real, a lot more than anybody else in their class right now at this point. And so it's good that she's there to kind of get his head out of his butt and say, okay, yeah, I get it.
She literally slaps him.
Yeah. It's like, get it together, my guy. And it's good because she's able to kind of drag him up and get him associating with others. And she was right. It's like, nobody's going to be able to relax and chill if one of our number is not
off pouting.
Is off pouting. Yeah, exactly. Because they're going to be worried about you. You know, really being a hero in this moment is showing up for your friends, whether you feel like it or not.
Yep.
And that was like, it was a great truth bomb. I was like, yes, thank you, Aerie. So we're able to get it together and go have some fun.
Yeah. One thing that I did want to kind of highlight on is that they both kind of they almost take turns, like, trying to play the blame game for who's responsible for Umbra, because she's like, oh my god, if I hadn't, like, brought you back, then he wouldn't be
and
pissed.
He's like, okay, stop right there.
And they both kind of start doing the back and forth, and then Aerie's just like, wait, you know what? Nope, we're not doing this.
Yeah.
We're not doing the blame game. Umbra's the villain. He's the one causing the problems. That's on him.
Yeah.
This isn't on us.
This is not a productive conversation, and we need to just move on.
Yeah. And then we also, like, in the last part of that conversation, we get the confirmation that Aerie is choosing to, not only is she not going to rewind time to avoid this war to begin with, she's not going to resurrect anybody.
Yep.
If they die.
Yeah.
Because she saw what it did to Kurai. She's not going to do that to someone else again.
Which I think is good, because I think it's going to put Kurai's heart at ease a little, if at least a little, moving forward.
Yeah. Well, like, and it's also going to force everyone to take it a little more seriously, I think, because like you don't get a reset button.
Yep.
This isn't Dragon Ball anymore. You don't get a magic wish and bring someone back. That's not how this is going to work anymore. And like, and it weighs on Aerie, because she knows she could technically be saving lives, but she has to say, she's like, this isn't saving lives. This is messing with stuff that no one should be able to mess with.
Yeah.
And something that I think, like, I don't know that I'll ever say as much in the narrative, but I think one of the reasons that Kurai was so uneasy about his resurrection in the first place is because subconsciously he feels like it's almost like a Nomu procedure. Because you're taking these corpses and you're forcing them to take on some semblance of life. And forcing them to act as the vessel for higher power, for lack of a better term.
That makes sense.
So, like, even if he doesn't put it into words, I feel like that's kind of been eating at him.
Gotcha. Oh, that makes sense.
And remember, he's the progenitor of the Nomus, essentially.
Yeah, that was the whole prompt for
premise,
this entire story.
It's like, what if there was a Nomu who didn't want to be a Nomu? So, like, maybe I should have explained that earlier on, but, like, I couldn't really find a way to insert it in the narrative without it being kind of clunky. So...
No, I mean, there's some things that are better left unsaid,
Yeah.
and if people really want to dig in, they can dig in, and, you know, now they know. But,
Yeah.
I mean, that's been the whole point to this exercise. So,
Yeah.
I think it's better to tell this. That's the whole point of telling a story, is so that someone can have that experience and come to that conclusion, rather than you just, like, throwing it in their faces, you know?
Yeah.
So...
So we move on to the party. Kurai makes more dead jokes. Everybody's like, "Okay, man, it's starting to not get funny." And he's just like, "Sorry, this is my only gimmick."
Yeah, and then we have a rematch of the two spicy girls.
Yep. I didn't plan for this in advance. I just had the situation lined up, and I was like, "Oh, this is the perfect way to get this party moving forward."
Oh yeah, and then it's hilarious after that, and we have fun. We have our little
I
hot
had
wing
fun with
eating
that
challenge.
because I really had fun with that because, like, as Kurai says, he's like, "Psh, you're 2 for 2 now." He's like, you're making her look like a lightweight. And I feel like we haven't gotten to explore Akamane's character as much. We'll get to do that more during the later part of the war arc, like kind of where the anime is at right now. But she has confidence issues. It's one of the reasons why she didn't get into the hero course the first time.
Yeah.
And for her, like, to have someone like him telling her, like, you're doing awesome, like, even for something as a joke, like,
and she's
in a
borrowed
classroom.
character too. Like, I really wonder sometimes where the original creator of that character, because we got, you know, Joe got permission.
They're off of they've gone off the grid.
Because Joe originally got permission from another fan fiction writer to borrow this character, and she's kind of becoming a really
she's becoming a side character.
Yeah, she's becoming a side character, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I've liked seeing that development, and so I makes me curious what the original creator would think.
Yeah.
But you know, fan fiction at this point.
Yeah.
But
I mean, hey, it's a thing. I'm having fun with it.
Oh yeah.
But so yeah, like he gets to try and give her a confidence boost, and that'll come into play, like not necessarily in a major way, but it'll be a factor in some later events, like the way that he's like encouraged her. Because I don't know if you remember, her dad's the one that saved his life the first. Yeah. So like, and you kind of get the feeling that like there's chemistry going on between her and Sarah, and like that's mostly been happening off screen, but like again, I don't have to capture everything on screen for what's happening.
Oh, I just assumed they were a thing at this point because the way they were acting.
They pretty much are at this point.
Okay, it's just kind of unspoken with everybody else.
Pretty much.
All right.
Yeah. Of course, right after that, we get the praying mantis dude from Class B. He's, as I understand, he's kind of like he's not the Bakugo of their class, but he's kind of a pill.
Yeah, and everyone's just like, bro, come on, really?
Yeah.
Like too far. But the nice thing is,
but he also kind of has like from an outsider's perspective, you could kind of see where he's coming from.
But it ends up being a really good conversation.
Yeah.
And I think it's comforting for a lot of the people there, and so it breaks the tension a little bit and kind of is a little bit comforting as they move forward and just kind of enjoy the rest of their evening.
Yeah, it's like, and I thought it was an important conversation that all these students get to have, where they're like, okay, it's like, okay, we die, it's the end, and Kurai has to be the one who tells us like, no, that's not the end. It's like, it's not great. It's like, it's not great that it happens, but you know, as long as you live your life
in a way
He has a
worthy of
Gandalf
honoring.
moment.
What's up?
He has a Gandalf.
He absolutely
moment.
has a Gandalf moment. I watched Return of the King as inspiration for this scene. What's up?
No.
But it ties in my love of Lord of the Rings, but more importantly, it ties into what Aerie's been encouraging him to do, which is like, you need to forgive yourself. You need to let go of this. Mm-hmm. And he's not totally there, and I don't know that he ever will completely be there, but you can see him moving in the right direction here. And then we've got Shadow showing up again, and he gets the drop on Roman Torchwick,
which is hilarious to me.
Oh yeah. The banter between the two of them was so much fun to write. Where it's just like Shadow is in complete control of the situation, and he knows it.
Yep.
And he is just having the time of his life messing with these people.
Oh yeah, it's great.
It's like he gets off on this kind of thing. This is fun time for him.
Yes.
Like he views these people as scum of the earth, so he's gonna mess with them the same way that they mess with innocent people. Is basically his whole prerogative.
Very curious to how that all ends up.
Oh yeah, this is gonna be fun. But for the moment, it looks like the Liberation Front is not going to be getting the trigger bombs that they thought they were going to be getting. So throw a wrench in that. But you know me, I wouldn't set that whole thing up if it wasn't going to go somewhere. So
and we have a really big chapter coming up.
Oh my goodness, next chapter is going to be insane. But before we get to that, we do have one final scene to go over, which is where we have the characters talking about what would they have done if they hadn't become heroes.
Oh yeah, that was cute.
Yeah, I had fun with that. That was really fun. I wasn't gonna go through and do everybody. Mm-hmm.
But we got some highlights.
We got some highlights, and then I figured the best way to do it was kind of just come in on the closing part of it, and then briefly mention some of the ones that had already gone. Mm-hmm. With Ida and Ojiro and some of the others, it's okay, these absolutely make sense that they would do this.
I'd be curious to see anybody who we missed. I'd be curious to see what everybody thinks.
Yeah. If you guys have any ideas for what people would do, what these characters would do if they didn't make it into the hero course, what do you think they would do? I had so much again. Bakugo's getting more and more fun to write as time goes on, because this one was really funny because of course he's going to be the one who's like, no, I'm a hero, that's it, that's all there is to it, I was never going to be anything else, and everybody else is just like, all right, we're going to make his decision for him. And then it ends with them playing Overcooked again.
Yep, which is great. And poor Todoroki.
Poor Todoroki, I'm sorry, that scene, just that image of Bakugo dragging him by the collar toward the TV, and he's just going, I don't know how to play this game, and Bakugo's just not having it.
Beautiful.
My dog is very, very needy today. Can I help you?
She wants to know where the kids are.
Oh, okay. She's very curious about that.
Yeah, she's not used to us being here without them.
That's funny.
Anyway, I think that's about it.
That's about it. We close up with the group taking a photo. In case you guys hadn't guessed, that's the image that I've been using for the audio for the podcast.
I know. I heard you do that background filter, and I was like, oh, that's why.
Yep.
That works.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I had to do it.
Yeah, but it was sweet.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to be honest with you guys. This next chapter after this one
is the reason she threw a Rubik's Cube at my head.
I threw a Rubik's Cube at my husband, and I never throw things at him. He's a very nice husband. I generally don't abuse him, but this one was warranted, in my opinion. I do not take back the Rubik's Cube after all this time.
Yeah, I hid the Rubik's Cube, and I honestly don't know where it is anymore, because I didn't want her to throw it at me again when this next chapter came back around.
So, anyway, looking forward to hearing from you guys and seeing you next time.
See you next time, guys. Have a plus ultra couple of weeks.